Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem. Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 121. It's the 19th of April. Dennis Schradov here with Kasper Rosalowski, sort of recovering from a fun time doing our last show with John Kavanagh last night in Melbourne.
Oh man, what a high to come off. A lot of fun last night, and man, I got to mention that was a really fun show, and a massive thank you to everybody who put that together. Pete and Mel, the promoters, Arena Entertainment, Angie, and of course John Kavanagh himself for being a sport. I mean, we fed the man Vegemite on a spoon in the first show in Sydney, and he just took it in his stride. And I mean, at the end of the day, it really wasn't about us in any way. It was just about making a lot of people happy. And I think seeing everything on Twitter and Instagram and everything like that, people seem to be pretty happy. A lot of dreams came true, and a lot of people got to meet John, got to ask questions. So as long as everyone else is happy, we're happy.
Yeah, that's right. And just a little highlight from last night's show, there was a guy dressed like a leprechaun, and he had some business plans to make Conor McGregor quite a bit of money. 3 copies of the business plans, gave us 2 copies on glossy paper, some interesting graphs and figures. This is like a pretty thick business plan. Like this is I'm failing my uni subject, I'm going all out on my final project type of business plan. Kasper, how much money was he actually projecting to make, Conor?
Between 62 million and 220 billion. I mean, wow. If you're making a business plan, that is. I mean, those are some big deviations, right? Like, what? I haven't read the business plan yet. I will. Like you mentioned, it is thick. It's going to take me a while to get through. But I mean, Jesus, what kind of business plan is this? Is if you may make 62 million, or you may make 220 billion. That's massive. He's going to be like a prince and probably own a country if he makes 220 billion.
Yeah, no, it was unbelievable. I gave it a bit of a flip through last night. We finished up really, really late in the night, but there were some funny photos and captions and stuff like that. So good on him for coming out to the show and giving us a copy of that. I can see myself looking back on it in 20 years' time being like, wow, why didn't I use this business plan? I'm so broke right now. But anyway, let's get to the show, because this show, Cass, I mean, we were very, very lucky. We've been able to get a very fun lineup for the people on the show today. A lot of stuff to talk about and some very fun people on the program.
I'm happy, man. I'm happy and I'm proud. I'm hoping that you guys are going to be enjoying this show, because I feel like the people that people want to hear from are on this program. We have Robert Whittaker. We actually spoke to him a couple of days ago. It's a pre-recorded interview that will be on the show. And we caught him as he was leaving Kansas. He was literally on the airport. We were like, rah, baby. He's like, anything for Submission Radio. And that's exactly how the conversation went. But no, seriously, it was a very impromptu interview, basically. It came together literally in the last second. It was like first thing in the morning. And we had basically zero preparation. But we were like, man, Robert Whittaker, of course, we've got to do it. So Robert Whittaker's first actual interview since the fight. So we're very excited to play that for you. And the man who said he was impressed with Robert Whittaker, Luke Rockhold, he is on the program. Haven't spoken to him yet, but we are absolutely dying to speak to him about a lot of things. Obviously, Robert Whittaker, this Werdum fight, GSP Bisping in the middleweight division, everything. A lot of other guys as well. We've got Jake Shields coming onto the program, flying under the radar, but he's facing Dylan Dennis at Submission Underground 4. That is hotly anticipated. We got a very quick window with Jake Shields, so hopefully we get a fun chat with him. And then Gunnar Nelson, I think he hasn't been on the show in almost a year. We missed these chats with Gunnar Nelson. There's a lot to talk to him about. He obviously came off that fantastic win over Alan Jouban at UFC London, and this Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight is in the air, and a lot of people yesterday at the Kavanagh show asking about Gunnar Nelson. There's a lot of interest there, so yeah, a lot of fun. Oh, we got another guest, don't we, Dennis? We got a sexy breakdown coming for you guys.
Yeah, our buffet buddy, and that's no joke. He's one of my favorite people to go hit up the mean streets of the buffets in Vegas with Damon Martin comes back on the program. I mean, what a joy to have this guy on the show. We're going to be talking about the card from last weekend. Obviously, a lot of fun fights, including the Robert Whittaker win over Jacare, Demetrious Johnson's reign in the flyweight division. What's next for Thug Rose? And, of course, Tyron Woodley's next fight. What's going on there, man? We'll discuss it. Jon Jones at UFC 214. Why 214? Why not International Fight Week? We'll try and figure it all out, and a lot more on top of that. Not to mention, we'll sort of get Damon's thoughts on the main event from UFC Nashville, Artem Lobov versus Cub Swanson. That should be a really fun fight. And curious to see who's picking in that one, Cass.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be fun. Don't forget, I don't know if you mentioned, but Cris Cyborg as well. There's a lot of things that she might be on UFC 214 as well, so we'll be talking about that as well. A pretty hot, sexy, and spicy show that we got planned for you guys. Anything that you have, any thoughts, any comments that you want to throw down, by all means, give us your thoughts. We love reading your comments. If you are watching on YouTube, and if not, you can hit us up on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, or you can DM us or send us a sexy message on Facebook, facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAUS. We are very easily reachable, contactable, and even on Twitter, you don't even have to follow us to send us messages. We're very wide open for anyone to chat with us, so by all means, go ahead. And as far as the rundown, we are going to be speaking to Gunnar Nelson first, then we'll be playing you the Robert Whittaker interview that we did a couple of days ago, Jake Shields sneaking in there at third, and then Luke Rockhold, followed by Damon Martin with a big, juicy breakdown.
That's right, Cass. So a big action-packed show. And hey, I think it's time to kick it off. There's a lot to get to. And we've got our first guest on the line, Casper. I believe you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Now, next guest is coming off an incredibly impressive win over Alan Jouban last month at UFC London, one of the most dangerous welterweights in the world, and definitely our favorite Viking to talk to, Gunnar Nelson. Welcome back to Submission Radio. It's been a while. How are you today?
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. I'm very good. Just came back from training. Feeling good. Feeling relaxed right now.
No, good. Well, that's the way we like you to feel before an interview on Submission Radio. So hopefully we can take advantage of your current mood. And congratulations on the big win at UFC London. I mean, what's the last month been for you since the big fight? We know you basically got swamped by media afterwards. Have you enjoyed the extra attention, or have you had a chance to have you even had a bit of a chance to decompress yet?
Yeah, it's not been too bad, to be honest. Maybe I'm getting used to it a bit, and but yeah, it's been nice. I just went straight back home, and you do a good few interviews and stuff like that. But it's been cozy.
Very nice. Well, hopefully we'll keep that trend going of good interviews and add another one to the list. Speaking of decompressing, a little birdie told us, Gunnar, that you've actually really been getting into PlayStation lately, and you even play online, headset and everything. Is this true?
Yeah, it's very true.
Tell us about this addiction. How far in are you?
I'm deep, man. I'm deep.
What are you playing online?
I play Call of Duty on PlayStation.
Oh wow! And you like to get online, get the headset happening. How often do you play, and how long do you normally play?
Yeah, you need that headset, man. You gotta hear what's going on around you. You gotta hear them sneaking up on you. I'm on these bastards, Yeah, I play quite a bit. I got a good bit of free time, and I just jump on and do a few games. If I'm home, I usually play most days. At least a little bit. Sometimes a couple of hours, few hours, maybe. At night.
I mean, the question that we usually ask every fighter that talks about gaming, and by the way, me and Casper, we love to game, and I'm a PlayStation 4 man myself, but
nice.
The trash talking situation. Take us through this, because you are, you're a quiet guy, you're a humble man, your actions do the speaking for you, but I imagine Call of Duty, we've all been in those situations where you've got all these 12-year-olds telling you to F off and hey, you're a mofo and hey, you're nothing, and they kill you over and over. So do you have those moments where no one's looking around, there's no one in the room, and you just, you mention a couple of things to them online? And also, in those moments, has anyone ever actually figured out that you're Gunnar Nelson?
Well, I play with a couple of guys from England, and it was quite funny because we started talking, and after I've been playing with them for, a while, a few weeks or a few months, I don't know, they started kind of talking more and started talking about UFC, and I was like, okay, you watch UFC and all that kind of stuff, and then eventually I tell them who I am, and they're a bit like, yeah, right, of course. But then one of them, I just basically proved to him, the guy I play most with, and then he goes off and tells his friends, and they're all like, oh, fuck off, who are you talking about? But funny thing, he ends up coming up to my fight in London with a friend of his, and we meet him there, and it's fun. It's pretty cool.
Wow, that's crazy. Gaming brought you guys together. It's amazing how you reveal that you're Gunnar Nelson and no one believes you. It's like telling people I'm Batman, and everyone's like, sure you are.
It's like when we reveal we're Submission Radio to people on PlayStation, Gunner, and then they're like, "What's Submission Radio?" and stop talking to me, and then they tell their mum to block us.
Well, all right, there's a lot to get into, so let's get into it. Going back to, you mentioned guys from London. Speaking of UFC London, you almost missed out on fighting on the card. What did you think of the fact that a number of fighters turned down the offer to fight you? And have you ever had this situation before the fighters have said no to facing you?
Yeah, loads of times. I've had hard time finding fights. Usually, most of the time, a lot of guys drop out, or it's hard to get an opponent in the first place. Yeah, it was a little bit of a weird situation because first they told us that there wasn't any space on that card, so I wasn't going to be on it. Then, like a month before, they're like, you can be there co-main event, and we have to find you an opponent. I'm like, great, and then they go around trying to find an opponent, and nobody wants to fight or is able to. I don't know what the situation was, but then Joban steps up, and we just immediately say, yes, it's getting close, and I just want to get in there because it's been a while, So I'm very happy that he did, and it was a good night.
And just curious, what were some of the names that were offered to you that kind of declined the fight to fight you in London?
Well, there was talk about, Don Young Kim, Neil Magny. I don't remember. Masvidal maybe, and a couple of others. But I don't know the situation, if they were just mentioning them to us and seeing if we would agree, and we just say yes to everyone, and then and then I don't know if they hadn't talked to them yet, and then they were injured, or they were, I don't know what they had in their mind, but yeah, it was just a little weird situation. It took a while to find an opponent, but we managed.
Yeah. Well, respect to Alan for stepping up. Do you sort of feel like the welterweight division is a bit on notice now and recognizes that you're very stiff tests and you could seriously derail any of their title aspirations? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I appreciate that he stepped up there. He's a cool guy. He's a tough fighter. And I mean, it was a big win for him if he would have won the fight, So he jumped on it, That was his view on it, and a good one, in my opinion. I definitely would have taken the fight if it was vice versa.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and I mean, he's fought in Australia a bunch of times. Just the guy that goes out there, takes his matchups, and tries to put it all out there. Now, after the fight, you said you enjoyed spending more time in the octagon because you can learn more. What would you say you learned from this past fight?
Yeah, spending time in there just gives you, you just get more experience in there. That feel, that energy that's inside the cage is different, than training. So it's good to get some airtime in there if you're not getting damaged. So from this fight, it was he was setting up his strikes with his kicks. I was taking my time a little bit, trying to find the openings. What I learned, I think, what helped me in this fight was just being able to strategical thinking. Just like taking my time, watching him, feeling how he moved, and then kind of pulling the trigger. Touching him a little bit. Putting him against the cage, getting that feel, maybe not even committing that much to a lot of the things that I did, and then pulling the trigger when needed. Sometimes you have to drag it a little bit just to get that little bit of extra. Find these few little openings, and don't necessarily go for them right away, but wait for the moment. Wait for the moment until you get your rhythm going, and just taking my time a bit. Whereas before it was more just pure instinct and not even thinking at all, just going back and putting up a strategy while I'm in there,
Yeah. I love that while you're talking about taking your time and being more sort of patient and strategic, you're still putting the guy away in the second round. I mean, it's one of the things that fans love. And you said that you felt different in the cage this past fight than you felt in a long time, maybe different more than ever. What do you sort of attribute that to, and have you figured out how to bring that out of yourself every time?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is that what I'm talking about is, you can you go by instinct, right? And you can finish your fights quick, right? But some of these fights are gonna be tough. Some of these fights, it might just not all click, and then you have to kind of pull back and like what is it here? What is it that I need to do? And I've noticed that in training, that sometimes I've been training with some guys and I'm having trouble with this or that, and then I just kind of pull back a little bit and I kind of trying to find the missing puzzle, and then all of a sudden you kind of find it, and then it becomes like easy almost, but before it was like almost impossible or very hard. But because I want to finish my fights, right? So instead of going on autopilot mode and just trying to finish it right there and then, maybe just finish it in 2 minutes, or finish it in 2 minutes from here, or a round and a half from here. Try to take my time to get that finish.
Yeah, and I mean, after the Tumenov fight last year, you told us that you're going to take some time to enjoy the summer with your son and have a bit of a vacation. What was that like? And what did the time away from the cage do for you? Did you feel like you needed another breather? And did you perhaps gain any perspective from your time away from the cage?
Yeah, I always learn a lot when I get some time off and go just training, not having any fight coming up. And I feel like that does me a lot of good as well. You can kind of, you train differently when you don't have a fight coming up. When it's camp, it's camp. When you're just training, you're just playing and you're more relaxed maybe, and you'll happen to figure out a lot of stuff. You let yourself just kind of flow, and that feels very natural to me. I spent a lot of time with my son, and obviously it was a bit of a letdown that I injured myself. That wasn't really the plan, but it turned out not too bad.
On the plus side, you got to spend more time with your son, and then of course, more importantly, you got to spend a lot of time in front of the PlayStation. So I think it worked out for everybody.
Yes.
I was going to say, something that we've always wanted to ask you, never have. You've often been described as a very stoic guy, kind of like Fedor or Emelianenko. I've always wondered, when you're in the octagon or the cage, what does the crowd do for you? Like, when you obviously you've got a massive Irish support, and obviously in Europe you're huge. When those fans are going crazy and they're cheering for you, are you able to sort of take it in and feed off the crowd, or is it more of a case where you have to block it out in order to focus? What's going through your mind?
No, I do take it in. I don't notice it that much. Like when I'm walking in, I notice the crowd, I notice everyone, but at that moment I'm just I'm walking to work, and I just I don't really take it that much in then. I'm just kind of in my own zone, if that makes sense. Some guys are, putting their arms up and waving and jumping around and soaking it all up. At that moment, I'm not really into that too much, but I do hear it sometimes. I remember some situations where I maybe gotten somebody down, got into the mount or something, and I hear, insane cheering, just for like a split second, but then I go just back to work. But then after the fight, obviously, it feels amazing, yeah. And just outside the cage as well, when you feel the support you're getting, it does a lot for you, definitely.
I mean, we know you've sort of been like this for a really long time, but when people compare you to Fedor, is he sort of a guy that you ever looked up to and sort of wanted to model your demeanor and martial arts mind after? Is he someone that sort of inspired you, the way he handled those kinds of situations?
Yeah, well, I didn't see too much of him outside the cage, to be honest, but he was always my favorite fighter back in the day. I just liked his style so much. I did like the way he was calm, and maybe I related a little bit to his style. I didn't relate as much to them guys that were like screaming and running around, going crazy and all aggressive. I would rather be. I would, relate a lot more to him and his kind of, the way he was focused when he was going into the fight. That was more how I felt when I was going into my fights. But his style as well was just so nice, and he was just like a little, well, he was a small heavyweight. He's a big guy, obviously, but he was like a, like he just looked like an ordinary dad. Got that belly going and just went in there and just whacked someone. And he could do it all as well. He would submit people. He would knock them out. Great takedowns, great judo. Quite slick on the ground. He just got the job done in a nice fashion, I thought, and I always liked him.
And I'm curious, what about the funny memes of like your different facial expressions and emotions where it's just like 20 of the same picture? Do you sort of get a laugh out of that? And you kind of surprised that people have this like fascination with you and your calm demeanor?
Yeah, sometimes. Actually, Connor sent me this picture the other day. It was like my face just very, very normal, and it just said, rolling on the floor laughing underneath. It cracked me up a little bit, I have to say. But yeah, it's there's been a lot of that, for a good few years now. It is funny. It is funny.
Well, we've been speaking of your team. We've been spending some time with John Kavanagh here in Australia. We just actually wrapped up a show with him last night in Melbourne. And we've been talking with him a little bit about what's next for you. He mentioned to us that at the moment you're having a little bit of trouble once again finding an opponent. Just talk to us a little bit. Are people sort of just like with London, are you having trouble with people agreeing to fight you for your fight now?
Yeah, I am. I am actually. I'm struggling a little bit getting an opponent. I don't know. I think a lot of them are matched up. And so we'll have to see. I know Wonder Boy is probably not looking to fight me at the moment, but he said that we'll end up facing each other. And, that's how I see it anyway. I've always said that I don't mind who I fight, like in which order I fight them guys. I'll definitely end up fighting them and the other guys as well. So, we'll see. Well, I'll get an opponent.
Were you a little bit disappointed? Yeah, I mean, I guess you're not too fussed because you're happy to fight them whenever. I'm just curious, on Wonderboy, did you pay much attention to his fight against Tyron Woodley at UFC 209 and sort of seeing what you saw? Did it give you confidence that you'd be able to beat him, possibly even more dominantly than others have in the past?
Yeah, definitely. I can see flaws in his game, like anyone. So I could definitely see myself beating him. And I would like to get that fight, and I will get that fight eventually. But I'm not stressed, I don't mind when I fight him. But yeah, that second fight against Woodley, I didn't. It wasn't great from either guys. I thought obviously these are two very high level guys, and they were a bit too wary. Something they were like. They didn't pull the trigger. I thought in the second fight they would maybe pull the trigger a bit more, because they fought each other before. But it was kind of like the whole fight was like the boring moments of the first fight, because the first fight was pretty damn good, I thought. But yeah, sometimes it's just like that, innit?
And before we sort of jump on to Woodley and ask you a couple of questions, I mean, last night it seems like when people are asking John who would fight you next, Neil Magny sort of popped up as the name of possibly the most likely opponent. Is that sort of what you're looking at the moment as the next most likely fight, or with Neil, is that even question marks all over that one?
Yeah, I think that I don't know. I think he's injured, but I'm not sure. But I think he's injured. But that would have been something that would make a lot of sense. And I don't know when it will happen, but I think he's injured at the moment. But yeah, definitely. He's somebody that will make sense for a next fight, for everyone.
And you're obviously coming off 2 dominant wins, 2 really good performances. Whereabouts do you think you fit in the division right now? Like, I know that you're not too fussed in what order you fight these guys, but I mean, while there's a lot of hype and fan support behind you, you've always sort of seemed kind of unfazed by the rate at which you ascend the rankings. But are you at a point now where you're eager to face a top 5 fighter and sort of prove to the world that you're a contender? Do these last couple of wins make you feel like you're pretty much ready for these? I don't know if obviously the UFC is not necessarily going to give you a title fight, but just to really run down the division at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get to fight the top guys in the division, and I'm ready. And it's just a matter of who will fight me next, and we can keep climbing. You know, that's my view on it. I don't know. I think I'm ranked maybe 9 at the moment or something like that. I don't really follow these ranks too much, but yeah, definitely. I'm ready just to fight these top guys. I thought I did take the fight against Joban, and you know, that kind of shows that I'll take a fight against somebody that's ranked below me and give them a chance, you know. So I think the other guys should do the same.
And if we've seen anything, rankings don't really indicate much these days. Anyway, now the crazy thing is, last time we spoke to you, Robbie Lawler was still champion. What do you sort of think of Tyron in general as a fighter and what he's been able to do as champion? Because we're pretty sure you originally picked Lawler to beat him. Are you starting to sort of see him as potentially a guy that could hold the belt for a long time and be a long-term champion?
I don't think so, to be honest. But he is good, and he's got a lot of power. And I think a lot of them guys have power. He's got a lot of speed as well, and he's aware and he's ready. You know, you see it against Thompson that he's got good reflexes. You know, he's ready at all times, and he kind of even maybe pulls back a little bit more than some guys. You know, stays on his back foot. You know, kind of defensive, and then he explodes forward, and he can cover a lot of distance fast. I mean, he's a lot smaller when it comes to, you know, like length than Thompson, but he was able to catch him a few times with that right haymaker, you know, and that just shows you that he's really fast coming forward, because I mean, Thompson is not slow. He moves in and out quick, so he should have been able to back off or defend these huge shots. But you know, he caught him a few times, so he's very fast. You know, so he's done really good with what he has, I think.
And I think the last time we spoke to you was around about a year ago, and you were saying back then that Damian Maia should be the guy to get the next title shot, and here he is, still hasn't gotten the title shot. But a lot of people are expecting him to be the next guy. And, you know, we're always curious because you've obviously firsthand felt his abilities in the cage. Who do you think would win between him and Tyron at this stage? Do you think Tyron's takedown defense will be too much for Maia to sort of be able to work his amazing grappling game?
No, I think Maia would definitely beat him. Of course, anything can happen. Woodley could land one of them bombs, but I think Maia would beat him. I think he'll get him down with his single leg. Tyron is a stocky guy, you know, short, stocky guy. They don't deal that well with single legs, so I think he will take him down with a single leg and just finish him, you know.
And at the moment, people are wondering who Tyron will even be fighting next. He put out an Instagram post where he's begun his camp, and he's also alluded a little bit to in a couple of social media posts that it's Conor McGregor. Of course, we know it's not Conor McGregor. We spoke to John last night, and everybody knows this Floyd Mayweather fight's just huge. But I'm just curious, when you and Conor are very, very close, do you guys ever discuss what would happen if you sort of became a contender in well, you are almost a contender, but if you were in that point where you were getting title shots in welterweight, would that be a situation where you guys sort of had a chat and then he'd focus more on the other divisions? Do you guys sort of have a bit of a chat about how that kind of works from a team perspective? Because you are sort of climbing the ranks and getting closer to that title shot.
Not really, but I don't think we would fight ever, to be honest. We've been training partners since we were 17, and I don't think that would ever happen. He'll just focus on something else. To be honest, you never know what he's gonna do next. You know, if he beats Mayweather, I'm not sure if he will ever fight again, to be honest. I don't know, but I could see him just floating off and doing something else crazy, you know?
Wow.
Well, otherwise, maybe he'll fight Khabib or something next, if Khabib is in shape. You know, I don't know what's something wrong with his kidneys or something after that cut. Well, yeah, we'll see. That's you know, I don't know what he's gonna do, but he's just focusing on one thing at a time. And right now, it's Floyd Mayweather, and I'm looking forward to that myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everybody is. We're going to circle around back to you in just a moment, so we can finish this interview on you, Gunnar. But obviously, you mentioned that you think that you're not really sure if Conor McGregor would even come back after the Mayweather fight. What is sort of giving you that indication? Is it have you ever spoken about something along those terms? Have you had a conversation with him in the past where you've gotten that vibe from him? What are you sort of basing that on, in your opinion?
I'm basing it on that he wants to go bigger every time. And if he beats Mayweather, like he's taken the 2 belts, right? And then he beats Mayweather in this huge super fight. And I'm not sure what he's going to see as a next challenge or a next thing that he wants to do. I don't know. I don't really see what he wants to come into the UFC again for. I'm not sure. Obviously, there's always something, but he's also having a baby, and I'm not sure where his mind is going to be. He's going to have a ton of money anyway. We'll see. Maybe he'll do another boxing match or something if it goes well. Maybe he'll get more money there. Be more interested in that. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. I have no idea.
And that's a fascinating point that you bring up. Actually, if you beat Floyd Mayweather and in boxing, you make a lot more money in boxing. Maybe stick around in boxing and see what happens next. That's a great point. Let's circle back to you. I mean, another big thing that's sort of happening in your division right now, Gunnar, is the fact that GSP is back. And while he is sort of taking on Bisping in the middleweight division, he is seen as one of the greatest welterweights of all time. Are you excited about the possibility of him maybe coming back to welterweight soon and having the chase to face him, especially considering that you both have very strong morals as far as pure martial arts sort of mindsets and the fact that you both started in karate?
Yeah, he's a cool guy. I used to watch him a lot and train with him a few times in New York, actually. I'm not sure what he's up to. We'll see how this fight goes for him, I think he's looking for them super fights as well. It would be interesting to see him go back to the welterweight. I'm not sure if I think he's just looking for these big super fights here and there, maybe fight Anderson Silva, or I think these guys are more looking for a big payday than a tough fight, to challenge themselves. I think they might be looking for a big payday more than that. He's already proven so much, and that's what I think, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you've dashed our dreams with a hard dose of reality. So I think you're spot on there. But I think that a fight between you guys would still be extremely fan friendly, and it'd just be amazing clash of styles. We'll let you go in just a moment, Gunnar, because we know it's super late in Iceland, so we appreciate the time. Just quickly, what is the timeline that you're eyeing? We know that there's obviously no opponent locked down, but in an ideal world, how soon would you like to get back in the octagon?
Well, we were talking about this summer, maybe July, maybe August. I don't exactly know what card's on. I know there's one in Glasgow in July, mid-July or late July. That would be a cool one. But then maybe it will be later. There's another one in Rotterdam somewhere at the end of August or maybe beginning of September. I'm not sure, but I would like to get 2 more this year anyway. So we'll have to fit them in somehow.
And final question. We know your friend Conor McGregor was in a Call of Duty game. Kind of feels like you should be the one in the Call of Duty games. And obviously the producers and creators of Call of Duty listen to our show weekly. So if they're listening out there right now, Gunnar, what's your message to them?
The Call of Duty community?
Yeah, or if the creators of the game, you never know who's listening. Give them your message as to why Gunnar Nelson should be in the next Call of Duty game as a character.
I started playing this game, just this new game now, Infinite Warfare. I didn't play it before. And I'm getting pretty damn good at this, so I can definitely picture myself doing a little bit of streaming, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. I think people are going to like that. But I'd love to be I said to my friends, actually, I'd love to be a zombie in one of them games, be a zombie that just comes back over and over again. There's nothing you can do. I'm always coming back.
Yeah.
That's a funny concept,
That would be sick. I think the next step is the Gunnar Nelson Twitch channel. I think everybody's on it these days, and I think fans would love it. But if not, to see you in a Call of Duty game, especially as a zombie, would be a treat for everybody. Gunnar, we always appreciate you coming on the show. Guys, don't forget to follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Gunny Nelson. There's a lot of amazing photos on there. I don't know who your photographer is, but there's some really high-quality stuff and a lot of fun action there. So, Gunnar, once again, thank you so much for coming to the program. Appreciate it, especially because it's late there, and good luck in getting that next fight. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, here on the program, I'm very, very excited to have a man on the show that caused quite a stir over the weekend when he beat Jacare in a very, very brutal fashion. Of course, he is Robert Whittaker, and he is joining us here on Submission Radio. Rob, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours, especially coming off such a big win. Paint the picture for us, Rob. Whereabouts are you right now? Where are we speaking to you from?
I'm in Kansas City Airport, happily making my way home.
You're at Kansas, so you're going to go home now. How are you preparing for this 40-hour brutal flight? What's the game plan here?
I don't know. Just suffer like everyone else. There's no secret.
Are you the kind of guy that gets a good sleep over the flight, or do you have sort of 14 hours of inboard entertainment, or are you just going to be raiding that snack cart?
Oh, no. Well, I'm going to be absolutely raiding the snack cart. But, I'm going to be absolutely thrashed by the time I get to Sydney.
Most important question, is it a United flight? And are you prepared for them to potentially try and take your seat away from you?
Yes, it is a United flight. But luckily I have one of my coaches here, Fabricio Werdum, who can, hopefully defend them against what's from me.
Yeah.
Well, that would be sweet, sweet justice. And just a tip there, Rob, because me and Cass will go over to cover the fights quite often. There's a little area near the toilet where they put all the extra snacks. Just maybe wander in there and slowly sneak them away, like in Shawshank Redemption when he was breaking down his fence, and then he'd throw out the remainder of it into the yard. That way, everybody can get fed. I think I'm still eating some of the food from last time me and Casper went over there to cover the UFC. So don't worry, there's plenty of food for the family if you want to bring them back with you. But let's quickly get into the craziness that was Kansas City over the weekend. I mean, it was a huge, huge fight. And part of me thought, hey, this is going to be a headlining fight probably here in Australia and New Zealand. But it did make its way onto the card over there in Kansas. I mean, what was it like fighting over there in Kansas? It was sort of a big deal for the UFC to be over there. Did you enjoy the process of fighting in the city?
Yeah, 100%. It's always a huge transit time. So I always come, about 10 days early to make sure that I have time to acclimatise and adjust myself to their times. And, it's an absolutely beautiful city. It was a great time being there, and the crowd was really receptive.
I know obviously you're in business mode, but did you get a chance to do anything else while you were in Kansas City? See any sites? Sometimes the UFC organise a bit of fun media, some of the local things. Did you get to see the city a bit much?
No, it's like I really am. I'm there strictly for business, so I feel doing anything other than business related before the fight is kind of disrespecting the fight itself. So I make sure that I'm only in my room, I'm bunkering down, I'm doing what I need to make weight and prepare myself for fight night.
Let's look about Jacare for a second. I mean, this is a guy that's been in the game for a really, really long time, a respected guy in the division, and a very, very tough test. I mean, a lot of people that didn't really know much about you thought, hey, this is going to be another Chris Camozzi type fight where Jacare goes in there and destroys his opponent. What was your interactions and experiences like with Jacare leading up to the fight? Did you guys have any nice moments together? Did you say anything to each other? Was there anything about the man that surprised you or stuck out to you?
Not really. He's a lot thicker than he looks. He always looks big on screen, but he doesn't quite look as thick until you're up in person with him. But our interactions were civil, man. I have a lot of respect for Jacare as a fan of the sport, and I'm a fan of his, and I was sad to see him lose on Saturday, but it is what it is. I went there to win. So, but I have nothing but respect for him.
It's funny hearing you say that it was sad seeing him lose, and yet, of course, like you were the one who handed him that loss. It's like you weren't just seeing him lose; you were the main culprit. You were the one that sort of did that. But I'm wondering, you've said this multiple times that you were a fan of Jacare. Any particular memories that stand out to you from his career that you remember? I mean, you're obviously a young guy. Do you remember at any point being a young guy watching some of his fights and going like, wow, there's a guy I really look up to?
I think just collectively, you know, the accumulation of all these fights together, making such a veteran of the sport, making such an icon of the middleweight division. He's always been there in the top 5, and he's been a killer like his whole career.
And how do you sort of move past that point of looking up to him? Because we have seen some fights in the past where fighters fight their idols, and the fight isn't necessarily the greatest. It looks like they sort of, I don't know, can't really get out of the gear, and it looks like a bit of a sparring match. This obviously wasn't like that at all. How did you sort of move past that and put that to the side?
I know why I'm going there. I know why I was going to Kansas City. I know why I was getting into the octagon, and that was to fight Jacare. I came there with all intentions of fighting him, and, you know, I wasn't about to be starstruck when the moment came.
I mean, you've spoken about it a few times at the post-fight press conference, but, I mean, for everybody listening at home, I guess the big moment in the fight was that first sort of grappling clinch exchange where you guys went back and forth and you were able to get up off the octagon. Talk to us sort of what was going through your head when that began, because I suppose that was the moment you and your coaches were preparing for a long time, and sort of staying cool, using your technique and getting out of there. But while it was happening, what was going on in your mind? Because I imagine a lot of people would be sort of freaking out in that moment, going, okay, I got to do this, otherwise things might go lopsided here.
Yeah, you know, I just had to do what I trained. I made sure I stayed calm. I made sure that I was doing what I needed to do. And it was very hard for me to, you know, like I wasn't even thinking really. It was all muscle memory. I had done months of training before that in bad situations, in good situations, and it's all muscle memory at that stage.
I mean, I guess the big question is, how do you do that? How do you have the ability to block that out? Because I think it might be one of the things that makes you so dangerous in the sport, the fact that you can go in there and you can flow through your techniques and use that muscle memory. Is it something that you had to train with your coaches, or is it just something that you remember having from a very young age where when you're in these pressure situations, you're just able to sort of do what you do?
Without a doubt, I think, you know, I was born to fight, and I think I have certain instincts that are only in people who are born to fight. But I train a lot, man. I train day in, day out with my coaches, and we train religiously, staying calm, game plans, formulas. And, you know, dude, like, if you train enough, anything will come second nature, you know?
And obviously that training is something that gives you confidence. And you've never, even though you're a very humble guy, you've never been short on confidence. You've always displayed that belief. But, I mean, that moment when he goes for the takedown, he tries to get you in the clinch, he gets you to the ground, and then you pop straight back up. That's got to give you a bit of confidence, though, right? In the fight, do you feel that in the fight? In the back of your mind, you're kind of like, wow, this is really, really going according to plan? Or are you not even thinking about that during the fight?
I'm not even thinking about that, to be honest. It's in the fight, it's just it's all reaction, instinct, muscle memory. There's no real emotion for me anyway. You know, this is my personal take on it. There's no emotion. I'm not thinking, wow, you know, like, good on me for getting back up. It's more just, I went down, I need to get back up, I need to keep it standing. You know, it's kind of just driving on instinct at that point.
There was also that moment when you dropped him and then you got straight back up and you were having a bit of fun in there as well. You sort of waved your finger at him. What were you sort of saying to him? Did you mouth anything? And what was going through your mind at that moment?
Well, he tried waving me to come down on the ground. And there's no way in hell I'm going to engage Jacare on the ground. It's a silly move for me, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that the restraint that you showed and your game plan, I think it just earned even more respect for your camp and for yourself after this fight. Talk to us a little bit about what that moment was like when the referee waved you off and you had won the fight. I mean, the emotions must have flown in at that moment when you realized, hey, I've done this. And especially being so far away from home, being in Kansas City of all places, when you achieve such a huge moment in your career.
Yeah, you know, it's a funny feeling when you put months and months and weeks of work in and get the result you're after. It really is. So to be able to get that and get the finish and get the win, I was over the moon. You know, I'm still kind of reeling over it at the moment.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel almost like your post-fight celebration was a little bit different. We've seen you many, many times here in Australia, and you're beating your chest hard, you're on the cage, you're almost going crazy. You seemed, I don't know, to me, almost a little bit more relaxed. When the win came, I don't know whether it was the fact that the Aussie crowd was there, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it was tiredness, or maybe you just seemed a little bit more confident, almost as if you've sort of done this enough times, or it wasn't that crazy result that, I guess, overflowed you with emotion. You were a bit like, yeah, I expected this. Am I wrong, or am I sort of getting it there?
Well, yeah, I did. I put in all the work, and I really did work hard for this fight, man. And I think my performance showed that. I put in the work, but I can't discount when the Australian crowd gets behind me. I just go a bit nuts. I'm not ruling that out at all.
I mean, one of the most important things to you is your family, your wife, and your child. Talk to us a little bit about what that moment was like when you were actually able to jump on the phone and speak to her and sort of talk for the first time after that win. Was that an emotional time for you?
Yeah, I'm just, it's hard to explain. I'm just, she actually came with me. She came with me to Kansas City. She came in a bit late and just spent like 5 days with me. And her being there is one of my biggest supports, because before, regardless of the result, I know she'll be there for me to look after me no matter what happens. And, for me, it's how can I lose from that point,
Yeah, that's amazing that you've obviously got some of that hometown support, and who better than the missus. I'm wondering, does she always come to your events, or is this the first time when she made the trip to America?
No, she always comes to my events. Whether the kids or not can make it is sometimes a bit hectic.
Yeah.
But the only fight she's actually missed was when she was too pregnant to fly.
Let's talk about the celebrations. I mean, we expected you to be all business in the fight week, but after you do something like that and the missus is there, we imagine you guys go all out on Kansas, have a few cheeky drinks, maybe, I don't know, go have a bit of a dance. What was the celebrations like for Robert Whittaker, his team, and his missus after that big win?
Yeah, the celebration was just dressing up a bit. We went out, we got a bite to eat, and then just went back to the hotel room. We called our family, and we started packing, ready to go home and see our boys.
The foodie in me has to ask, what did you eat? What was the post-fight celebration meal like? Are we talking like an In-N-Out burger? Or are we talking like lobster and steak?
We got Kansas City barbecue. It's, I found a love for cornbread that I think will ruin food for me forever.
Oh wow, there you go. So Robert Whittaker's staying in Kansas. We're never going to see you now that you've discovered barbecue. I'm wondering, did you get a chance to speak to Jacare after the fight? You were very, very respectful, and obviously you mentioned it means a lot to you. You're kind of sad to see him lose. Did you speak to him after the fight backstage?
No, I did. I saw him this morning, and I wished him a good flight. He wished me a good flight. He said congratulations to me. We're very respectful of each other, and there's no animosity between us. We're both athletes. We know what the stakes are getting in there, and one person wins, one person loses. Another night he could have been me. Who knows? But yeah, last night was mine.
Yeah, with the cornbread, but watch out, Rob. We don't want you moving up another couple of weight divisions because of your addiction to cornbread. Believe us, that stuff stays on you and it's hard to get rid of. Let's talk about, before we jump onto what's next, and I know you're still everything's still sinking in. I wanna bring up a moment with you. I remember when me and Casper were there at UFC Sydney. It was Bisping versus Rockhold. You were moving up from welterweight to middleweight when you fight with Clint Hester, and a lot of people thought this was going to be the end of Robert Whittaker. How can he move up from welterweight after losing at welterweight to middleweight and succeed? A lot of people thought that was going to be one of the last times we see it in the octagon. And now here you are in your middleweight campaign, probably maybe one fight. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe even closer than that to a title shot. Can you sort of explain to the people listening at home who haven't really followed your journey, what was that like, jumping up to middleweight and really having your back up against the fence and going from that moment to this moment here where you've become sort of, one of the most looked up to names in the division?
It's I was in a bad way after getting my back-to-back losses in welterweight, and I needed to really reestablish who I was as a fighter and as a person. But I did those things. I made the right calls. I surrounded myself with people that cared about me. And I knew I was always going to have to move to middleweight, and just doing the right things led me to where I am.
I'm curious. You say that you had to sort of change who you were as a person. What exactly do you mean by that?
I just like things that you do inside the octagon affect things on the outside and vice versa. And, you just got to get your priorities in straight.
Okay, gotcha. Well, what as far as this fight goes, I mean, not only did you beat Jacare in brutal fashion, but you did it faster and more dominant than two guys that are currently ranked above you in Yoel Romero and Luke Rockhold. How do you feel about that, knowing that these guys have sort of been staples of the division, talked about as contenders for a long time, and in a big way, you've essentially one-upped them?
I want that belt. I'm going for that belt. This is my run, and I'm going to tear through anyone that gets in the way.
I mean, I know you've already heard about this. We sort of learned about it for the first time at the post-fight press conference. But this call out from Luke Rockhold, I mean, he's looking to possibly fight you next. I guess he sees you now as a big sort of road back to a title shot. Where are you at with that fight? Are you interested in fighting Luke Rockhold? Or are you at a position at the moment where you just want to see what happens with Bisping and GSP?
The only thing I want to do right now is I want to go home and see my boys. I'm not even thinking about fighting right now. I literally just finished one. I'm not thinking, fighting isn't everything to me. I want to go see my family. I want to go spend time with my kids. And then I'll sit down and I'll sit with my coaches and we'll make the next plan. I don't plan too much at the moment. I just finished the fight. I got to go see my family first.
Is it kind of funny that when I spoke about back in that memory when it was Luke Rockhold versus Michael Bisping in the main event, and you jumped to the middleweight division and people were like, this guy's not going to make it. And now these guys are trying to get a fight with you, to get it to the title shot. How does that feel all these years later?
Yeah, it's funny, but life's funny. Things work in mysterious ways sometimes. And yeah.
And the other crazy thing is that obviously Michael Bisping, you were supposed to fight him at UFC 193. That didn't happen. You ended up fighting Uriah Hall instead. How important is it for you to sort of fight him? And are you kind of sentimental in that sense that you'd like to get that fight back and beat him for the belt? Or are you sort of at a point where you don't really care who holds the belt? As long as you win the title, you're happy with that?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I'm hunting for the belt more than anything. He's holding the belt at the moment, and he owes me a fight. That works in my favor. And if that's how I get the belt, that's how I get a crack at the belt. That's what I want. But I'm hunting that belt. Let's not be confused.
Yeah. So I mean, a couple more questions, Rob, and we'll let you go because we know you're in a rush. That belt is in a funny situation right now, and God, I mean, timing wise, a lot of people could say it couldn't be a worse time to sort of be up the top of the middleweight division. So the UFC looks like they're going to be doing this fight between GSP and Bisping, but no date has been set. It looks like it's going to be towards the end of the year. And then if GSP beats Bisping, which, there's a good chance of that happening, it doesn't even look like GSP looks to defend his title. He just wants to use it as a way to build up his sort of name and go to other divisions and sort of hold a few titles at once. So knowing what we know, and this is sort of the public knowledge that we all understand right now, mentally, is that kind of frustrating? Because it looks like the belt is going to be, even though it's one fight away, it looks like this belt is going to be tied up for quite some time.
I haven't given it much thought. I don't really think about the machinations of the UFC or their plans and plots to move the belt around or the plans for the athletes. Like what the athletes are planning for the belt and how they're going to move it around. I'm doing my thing. I'm on my journey, and eventually the belt will just fall in my lap. Trust me.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Dana White, he's big on you. He's been watching you for a long time. When we spoke to him, we spoke to him about you. When he speaks to people after your fights, he always puts you over, talks about how much he likes you. Did you get a chance to speak to him at all after your fight? And if so, did he say anything promising to you?
No, I spoke to him. He said congratulations. He's a nice guy. He come up to me and congratulated me for an awesome fight. And I've put the division on notice, and I look forward to things in the future.
Mm-hmm. And speaking on that future, obviously you're reveling in the win. You're going to take some time to sort of celebrate, enjoy it. More importantly, spend time with the family. But I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask, because obviously everybody sort of wants to know. We don't know what will happen with this Rockhold fight, but if the UFC does say, look, Rob, we want you on International Fight Week, I believe July 8th, is that enough time for you to prepare? If they really made it worth your while and you made that decision with the family that I'm going to go for it, is it enough time for you to prepare for a guy like Rockhold?
I'm where I'm at right now. I'm ready to fight absolutely anyone. But like I said, I didn't even give it another thought. Someone else had to tell me that he actually asked for it. I got no idea what's going on. I just want to see my family first.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, if I may, and this is going to be one of the last questions, if not the last, what do you think that will sort of depend on when you make that decision, when to fight, who to fight next, and things like that? What would you sort of weigh into that, decision?
Well, my decision is made. I want that belt.
Mm-hmm.
So all my intentions are leading me towards that singular goal.
Is there a chance you sit out and wait for the winner as opposed to fighting someone in the meantime? Do you feel like you've sort of earned it now that you're on this massive streak?
Who knows? If these decisions aren't mine alone to make, I make these decisions with my coaching staff and all that. And yeah, whatever happens. So it's fun.
Rob, we'll let you go. Last question. I mean, one of the things that people talk about you, and I mean, I've seen this in the comment section of a lot of your videos and your interviews, is the fact that you're a humble guy. You're a very, very humble guy. You don't like to talk shit. You like to, hold yourself at a high level, and you feel like you're representing Australia and New Zealand. Talk to us a little bit about your mindset of, I suppose, being a role model for people and sort of staying respectful and very modest in your interviews, because I mean, I think for a lot of Americans, especially with what's going on right now in MMA, it's sort of something new, and it's opposite to sort of the Conor McGregor effect that we're seeing happening with the division and the whole sport in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, I'm just being me, really. I think you got to be respectful of your opponent. You have to show respect. I think respect is key to competition, and staying humble, you got to, I go through the front door like everyone else. I wait in line for my order like everyone else. I'm no one special. I'm just good at a particular skill set, that thankfully people can appreciate. As for being a role model, I think you need to lead by example. I think it's hard to call yourself a role model if you're smack talking every second person and you're trying to, put on a mask just to sell tickets. But at the end of the day, I'm just being me. And I always strive to make Australia proud and New Zealand proud whenever I get in there and I put on a performance. And, hopefully I'm doing that. And, that's all I've ever wanted with my career.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're all very, very proud. I mean, you've earned it. This is just an unbelievable experience. Congratulations again. Enjoy your family. Guys, Robert Whittaker, you can follow him on Twitter. Make sure you do. RJ Whittaker 9090. Who knows? Maybe you'll get an opportunity to play some video games with him. There's a lot to the man that you don't know yet, so make sure to follow him, especially if you're outside Australia. And this is the first time that you've seen him dominate, because he's been doing it for a long, long time. Rob, best of luck on the flight. If there's some problems, hope you and the coaches can handle it. And we can't wait to see what's next, mate. Have a great time with your family and a great flight. It's a real honor for us to have you on the program. Congratulations once again.
Thanks so much, buddy. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my two favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
All right, guys. Our next guest is taking on Dillon Danis at Submission Underground 4 on May 14th. He is known for his outstanding American Jiu-Jitsu, and he's a former Strikeforce middleweight champion with classic matches with Dan Henderson, GSP, and victories over Damian Maia and Tyron Woodley. Jake Shields, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going, man?
Hey, man. Thanks. Going good. Just got done training.
Well, that's good to hear. And we want to talk about Submission Underground 4. But before we do, let's just quickly talk about World Series of Fighting 34. You had a big fight with John Fitch on the New York card at the end of the year. I guess a lot of people are sort of wondering, Jake, where are you at now when it comes to your MMA side of your career?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm taking it one fight at a time. That was a fight that I just didn't feel that great. I think Fitch performed pretty good. I took a little bit off. That was a frustrating fight. But, I'm making changes right now. I'm not in New York. I've been working a lot of wrestling out here, jiu-jitsu, some new boxing, making some changes. I'm going to take it from here.
Great. And even though you're sort of busy on the grappling circuit last year, we saw you only had one MMA fight. Are you looking to sort of make up for lost time this year and step in the cage more frequently this year?
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to fight June or July. I'm just waiting for World Series to figure out exactly when and who.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Okay, so June and July. Are there any names that sort of stand out to you at World Series? I mean, you're a big name yourself. Are there any big names that would make for an exciting matchup for you?
Yeah, there's some good guys, but it's tough finding someone, someone's going to excite me to fight there. They're definitely good, talented guys, but it does get a little bit tricky.
And now, sort of, what is the goal in World Series of Fighting at the moment? Are you looking to go all the way back, get back into the title picture, maybe have a rematch with John Fitch at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I always want to be the champion in the show. I think I'm definitely capable of it. I lost that fight. It's a close fight. I just, like I said, I felt like I did a lot of things wrong, and I realized what I need to work on. So I'm out here trying to fix the holes in my game.
I guess a lot of people are sort of wondering what your situation with World Series of Fighting is like. Do you have many fights left with them? Are you happy to stick around with them for sort of the foreseeable future?
They've always treated me good. They're a good show. They're treating me good, really happy. The only thing is, it's hard for a lot of guys my weight to fight. That's my only downside. But overall, it's a great promotion. They pay well and treat me well.
And I mean, a lot of movements around the MMA world in other promotion. I'm just wondering, with everything that's going on in, say, Bellator and even the UFC, would you at any point sort of be interested in making a move once your contract allows you to?
Yeah, like I said, I take one fight at a time. I'm not trying to ditch out on World Series, but I mean, Bellator and UFC are obviously both great shows, and they do have more people I could fight. But like I said, I just, I'm being treated well and just, take it one fight at a time.
I guess the big story here, Jake, is, and the reason why people kind of want to see you back in the UFC eventually is, of course, you've beaten the current champion in Tyron Woodley and the other dominating force in Damian Maia. I mean, what do you think about division currently and Woodley as the champion?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a lot of interest, having beat the champ, and Maia probably been the number one contender. So those are guys I beat, and not that long ago. I still feel like I could beat those guys. So it does make it tempting to want to go in there and beat Maia and beat Woodley again.
I wonder how often is that something that you think about, and is it something that you ever think about realistically doing, or is it more just something that's kind of on your mind as maybe sort of one day?
Yeah, I mean, more like maybe, because I said I'm a World Series, have fights with them, so I'm not dying to trying to get on my contract and jump over. But if it fell into place, I'm a little older, but I don't feel old. I feel back in New York. I'm rejuvenated again. I feel like I'm learning lots of new stuff, and if the situation arises, I'd love to get in there and fight Woodley again, or fight Maia or Masvidal, or one of the top guys, so I can go in there and beat those guys.
And of course, the name you're leaving out as well is GSP. He's on his way back, and okay, he's making a bit of a detour down at 185. But seeing as he spent a great time at middleweight, and he's a previous opponent, how do you think he'll do in middleweight against Michael Bisping?
That's a really interesting fight. It's Bisping. He's a lot bigger. He's a tough guy. He's well conditioned. It's certainly not an easy fight, especially after the 3-year layoff. But ultimately, I'm going to pick GSP just because he's one of the greatest of all time, and he goes out there and finds a way to win. But it's a fight I'm really excited to watch.
And obviously, if you stay away from the UFC, then that's going to be, a challenge that is sort of going to make things easier for everybody there, including GSP. But if he does go back to welterweight, I mean, he ruled that weight class years ago. Do you think he'd be able to sort of hold the belt again in this current evolved welterweight division?
I mean, it's tough, but most likely I think, I'd probably pick him over all those guys. They're not easy fights by any means, but I think GSP still has the skill set to do it. He's got some of the best takedowns. His striking's good. He's well-rounded, and he's a guy that even if he hasn't fought in a while, he's been training the whole time.
And I mean, obviously a huge, huge fight in your career when you took him on. Do you think about that fight often, and would that be a rematch that you'd really sort of like to happen before you finish out your career in MMA?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a fight I'm shooting after, but I mean, he's probably the greatest welterweight of all time. So who wouldn't want to fight GSP? It's like he's a guy I got a lot of respect for. I'm actually friends with him, so it'd be a little weird to fight him. But it's we became friends after the fight. But I'm not. But he's also a guy that I wouldn't turn that fight with. It's just it'd be too big of a fight.
I'm interested. You say you're friends with him. Can you talk to us about what has that dynamic been like? Obviously, we sort of only see him pop up in the media with recently these negotiations. But I'm wondering if you've sort of kept in contact or even trained. If you guys have trained together throughout this whole process.
Yeah, not the whole process. Recently we trained together actually because I'm out in New York training with John Donahue right now.
Yeah,
he's out there with the Enzo Gracie and those guys, and he's actually GSP's old jiu-jitsu coach. So I mean, of course, it's a little weird because John had coached GSP against me, but now we're all a little weird all training together. But he's a guy that I haven't trained with him a ton, but trained with him a couple times, and it's a little weird training with a guy you fought like that. But he's a guy I have a tremendous respect for.
Well, let's talk about Submission Underground because, I mean, this is a big, juicy matchup. People are really, really excited about this one. You'll, of course, be going up against Dillon Danis. We've had Dillon on the show a bunch of times in the past, and he's really been able to build himself a pretty big fan base. What are your thoughts on him as an opponent?
I mean, he's a great opponent. He's really skilled. He might be a little prick and mouthy and cocky, but the guy, I'm not going to knock his skills by any means. He's legit. He's one of the best in the world, and it's exciting to fight him.
You mentioned a bit of a prick and a bit cocky. Some people get rubbed the wrong way. How do you feel about that? I mean, you mentioned that you have a lot of respect for his skills. Does he rub you the wrong way in any way?
It's like half-half, you know what I mean? He's kind of a little Connor boy, having the rivalry with Connor, and then now I'm training with Hendo. They have a little rivalry. So, of course, there's a little bit of bad blood between the two of us. But overall, I don't think he's that bad of a guy. I think he is a little cocky, but he's also out there selling himself, and he's talented. He's young. So he's not someone I seriously hate, but I do want to go out there and kick his ass.
Mm-hmm. Obviously,
I don't want to lose someone that cocky.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, before you were announced as his opponent, he was trying to get that matchup with Jon Jones. What would you think about that? I mean, he was sort of touting that as the big money fight in grappling.
I think that'd be a really exciting match as well. It's a good matchup because Jon Jones obviously is bigger. He's one of the greatest fighters of all time. But I think it's pure jiu-jitsu. I think Dylan's a lot better. But with Jon having the size, it makes it interesting. If I had to pick, I think Dylan would probably take him, but it'd be an exciting match to watch.
Interesting. And I'm wondering, you mentioned some of the rivalries. What kind of reception and support have you noticed from sort of more the grappling community in reaction to this matchup? Because, as we mentioned, he's pretty vocal and he's making that transition to MMA. And then, there's the fact that he's teaching Marcelo Garcia, suspended him from his gym. Do you sort of get the feeling like the grappling community is backing you and sort of looking for you to, I guess, make a bit of an example of Dylan?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think some guys like Dylan, but overall, I don't think he's one of the more liked guys. There's been a lot of people that I didn't realize how many people didn't like him, but a lot of people are like, oh, kick this kid's ass. I can't stand him. And it's you definitely see it. And yeah, like you said, he's kicked off of Marcelo's team, which I have no idea what happened with that. But Marcelo's one of the nicest guys I've met, so he must have done something to be a prick to get kicked off that team.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, one of the big things about this matchup is you're a part of Nate Diaz's team. You guys have been together for a really long time. He's a part of Team McGregor, like you mentioned before. You mentioned how he's a bit of a mouthy prick, but the fact that there's that rivalry between your teams, does that give you any extra incentive to put on a display in this one?
Yeah, exactly. There's that bad blood between the teams, so it definitely puts more on the line when you're repping your team as well. So it's not just me; it's about that whole rivalry.
And considering how long UFC 202 was, even though it feels like just yesterday that we were getting your reaction from that fight afterwards, but you mentioned that the rivalry is still there and that, there's some people from that team that you wanted to face, and obviously Dylan being the main one. Are you sort of surprised that it took so long to get this matchup together? And I'm wondering, did you request for this matchup, or did Submission Underground just come to you and say, hey, Jake, what do you think about this one?
I mean, obviously it's a matchup I wanted, but they requested. It's funny. I've had like 5 or 6 different people hit me up and trying to put this matchup together. It's I think it's one of those ones people know the bad blood between us. So everyone wanted to put it together. Every time I've said yeah, but for whatever reason it just didn't quite work out. And now for a while I was starting to think Dylan was dodging me, but now apparently it's going to happen.
I'm just curious, who else were the other people that offered to make this matchup? And was it all just grappling, or did someone want to do it in MMA?
Yeah, grappling. I think it's then there's a few of these shows. There's the sub. I'm trying to think the name of these shows. There's all these new shows now. I think Grappling Industry is trying to put it on. Guy Seth puts a show. What's his show? I know he was interested in doing it. Thinking the guys over in England, I think we're mildly interested in it. We hadn't really gotten into like serious talks of it, but that was something we'd ran by them. So it was a show a lot of people had an interest in.
Well, obviously you're close with Nate and Nick. What were their reactions when they heard you be going up against Dylan Dennis? And are they going to be there for you for the matchup on the day?
I mean, they don't like Dylan, so of course I'm going to kick his ass. So it's more just I'll kick the guy's ass. And if they'll be there, I don't know. It's hard to say. They're kind of last-minute planners. Portland's not too far from where we're at, so a good chance we'll make it up.
What a crazy moment that would be. Dylan put something out the other day on Twitter, basically put a video of you throwing something at the infamous UFC 202 press conference and captioned it, "I've never witnessed so much athleticism in a single man. #Sequoia Shields." What do you think when you see that? And also, what do you think it's going to be like when you're around him at Submission Underground? We know obviously you're a professional, but will you sort of mentally be, I guess, taken back to that moment at that presser that, is really infamous nowadays?
Yeah, no. I think Dylan's just he's mad that I doused him with coffee because I threw the cup lightly because Dylan was really close with me and I got my target.
Oh, so you did actually get him.
About that. Oh, I got my target. I would have thrown it hard if I was like trying not to get him, but Dylan was just right there, so that's what I was aiming for. I got him and a couple of Connor's guys. Their shirts got coffee all over them. So I'll see if I can find some pictures of him getting hit since he's talking shit. He had coffee all over him. So it's pretty funny. So yeah, I think he was just mad that I got him good with the coffee. I know I saw him talking shit to Nate, and I'm like, oh, fuck this. And I chucked it at him. So, yeah. And then at the presser, it's just, I'm used to fighting with shit talking, so it ain't gonna rile me up.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll watch the replay of you throwing that coffee over and over. It's good to know that you hit your target, because we were wondering where that coffee was going. I wonder what ended up happening with it. So good to know that it ended up.
Yeah, no, it's funny. A lot of people were talking shit on that throws. They don't realize if you throw a full cup of coffee, if you chuck it like a baseball, that's going to fly open, and you're not going to get anything. So you got to kind of lob it slowly so you hit your target, which I did perfectly.
I love how there's so much technique to this. Like, people looking at it like, it's just throwing coffee, but you've really broken it down. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I was doing fast sneak, and I picked up the cup real quick, and I'm like, oh, that right there, if I throw it too hard, it's going to shoot open. So I just kind of like lobbed it. And I see everyone talking shit about my throw. I'm like, you realize that I'm throwing a full cup of coffee?
Yeah.
I'd like to see them try to throw that like a baseball. It ain't going to work. It's going to bust open right away.
Speaking of technique, Jake, I mean, let's talk about this matchup real quick. How do you see this playing out? What do you expect this matchup going like?
Well, Dylan is the guy that'll go for it, so I don't expect him to stall, which is nice. So I think we're just going to both go out there and start hunting for submissions right away. There's no point, so I think it's both going straight at it. And hopefully one of us will be submitted. Well, not one of us. Hopefully I'll be able to submit him in the regulation time and not have the overtime, because the overtime's a little weird. You start arm bars and backs. That's a position that, I think that's kind of a little bit shitty. So hopefully we don't go into that. Hopefully we'll get a submission in the regulation time period.
I feel like that'd be the sweet path to victory. And would you be interested in potentially having an MMA fight against him somewhere down the line and, sort of keep that rivalry going?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he obviously needs to have some fights first. But if he goes out there and looks good as a fighter and wins some fights, then of course.
Yeah, I mean, and the big thing with Dylan, of course, is he's been signed to Bellator, and a lot of people are sort of critical about that because he hasn't really had any pro fights, not real any real footage of him having any amateur fights. So he's sort of going to the big league straight away. Do you think that's a mistake, sort of jumping over to Bellator without really having any experience?
I think he has the name recognition, so as long as they build him, they need to not throw him right away at the Wolves. So as long as they give him a couple easier fights. And then if he looks well, then throw him with tough guys. So it depends on how he does it.
All right, Jake. Well, look, as we let you go, we got to let you go because you're obviously running to another training. Let's quickly end on this. What is the official prediction? How do you see yourself beating Dylan on May 14th at Submission Underground 4?
I'm gonna say submission regulation time. I don't like to call it submission. There's too many possibilities.
See, we were hoping for like flying triangle. Maybe some kind of weird.
Probably not the flying triangle. That's probably what I won't finish him in.
Well, there you go. We've eliminated that. There's only a few other 1,000 submissions to go through. Are there any other submissions that stand out? Do you think it'll be a choke? I believe I saw on your Instagram you said Dylan Dennis is looking to get choked.
A good chance to choke. I think that's probably the most likely scenario.
Well, there you guys. See a good solid choke at Submission Underground 4 on May 14th at Flow Grappling. And follow Jake on Twitter at Jake Shields AJJ and on Instagram at Jake Shields Jake. Thank you so much for jumping on the show. Yeah. Happy Easter, by the way. Hope you had a great weekend.
Yeah,
and we can't wait to see what happens at Submission Underground. This is going to be very exciting.
Awesome, man. Good talking to you guys.
Hey, guys. This is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is a man who basically does it all. He's the number 2 ranked middleweight in the world, a former UFC and Strikeforce champion, a skater, a surfer, an entrepreneur, a model, and a man who's on a mission and hungry to reclaim the belt and hold gold again. Possibly most importantly, he's a friend of the program. Luke Rockhold, welcome back to Submission Radio.
What's up, boys? How's it going?
It's very good. It's very good. We appreciate you taking the time. And paint the picture for us, Luke. Where are you joining us from at the moment? Because I mean, it just seems that usually when we talk to you, you're in some kind of locations near a beach, probably a surfboard, and maybe even a couple of beautiful women.
I'm home at the moment. I'm just trying to get some training in here and get some things together. Get ready to prep myself for the training camp. So I might squeeze in one little vacation before I go. So, but for now, I'm stuck in Santa Cruz. So,
I feel like you could have lied to us, Luke, and we would have totally brought it up. I'm in Monte Carlo. I've got a couple of ladies here, and I don't need to train because the ladies are going to keep me sharp. Something like that,
I've been working for it, but I'm not gonna lie and act like I don't have a flight to Cabo on Thursday.
Oh wow, there you go. Very nice, very nice. Carbo is always beautiful. Now you mentioned you're basically in training camp. We see you're on Instagram. You're hungry and you're training. The big question is, how is the knee? What's the update with the knee recovery? And can you give us the news that we've been eagerly waiting for the last few months? Every time we speak to you, are you now 100% able to train at 100% intensity? Is the knee back?
If you want to go to my Instagram and look at my story, I just posted last night. I was just ripping my left kick and feeling nothing really. This last week was the real first week I started throwing kicks, inside leg kicks, getting checked, and nothing really came back on me. So I'm 100% ready. I'm hungry, and July 8th is my date. And so now it's just finding the right dance partner.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
how about Bobby Knuckles? How about Bobby Knuckles? Man, the boy's looking good. Ozzy's got something to believe in right now. He's looking fresh, looking tight, and I think we make a lot of sense right now. The kid wants to get his title shot. There's a long list of guys in line right now, and I'm looking to get back at it. So I don't see anything better. I appreciate the competition, and I like what the kid's done, and I want to test him. I want to test myself. I'll get back at it.
Mm-hmm. And what about this? He's on this actual program he was on earlier as well. So you guys are on the same show. I'm sure he'll hear what you have to say. So talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on his win over Jacare. I mean, it was a super, super impressive win. Most of the world didn't really expect it to happen. They didn't really know much about Robert Whittaker. What was your reaction when you saw how the fight played out?
Man, I've seen Robert. He's tough. He's got heavy hands. He's quick in and out. I thought he would chew Jacare up on the feet if it got stuck there. I just didn't think it would get stuck there. Question mark was, how good is his takedown defense? And, when he got to the ground, he was very tight, calm, composed, and got his ass up. So, man, I got nothing bad to say about the kid. He's looking really solid and growing everywhere. Seems like he's getting better everywhere, and he's a real deal. So, I was impressed.
You know what's crazy? I still remember, this was in 2014 in September. There was that press conference before your first fight against Michael Bisping in Sydney. And it was obviously yourself, Michael Bisping, and then Robert Whittaker sitting right at the end of the press conference table, making his middleweight debut. Nobody really expected much. I mean, at that point, did you sort of expect him to sort of be up there, with the top guys like yourself and everybody at the lead and beating guys like Jacare? And did you ever expect that you would be in a position where, you're calling him out?
I've been looking for a fight between all these guys. I'm not necessarily calling them out. This is we're running out of opponents. Anderson Silva declined to fight. Other guys are obviously out of the mix. Yoel's waiting for an interim title or the real title, and I need to reestablish myself, and he looked good. So I kept my eye on Robert after that night, not before, but after.
Wow.
When he beat, I forget who it was that night,
Clint
but
Hester.
he looked. I didn't. Clint Hester, yeah. He looked sharp. I was in the back getting ready for my fight, and I seen him do his thing. So, and then the fights to follow that. The kids look good. He's been the top prospect around, other than the people that have been around for some time. So, I've been watching him, and he's come along nicely.
So I'm wondering, with that Anderson Silva fight, Luke, I mean, how exactly did he deny the fight? Was he offered the fight officially? Did he explain why he didn't want to fight you? Did you get much closure on why the fight never happened?
I don't think Anderson likes to match up. I don't know. They offered me the fight. It was way before my projected date, when I would be ready. But, the fight with Anderson, it's seemed fun at the time, and go down to Rio and do it. So I was up for it. I think he's looking for other routes. I'm not sure exactly what he's doing. I don't know if he's trying to, get favorable matchups. I think he thinks he matches up well with the likes of Kelvin Gastelum for some reason. And I think he's trying to put himself in a line where he could potentially leapfrog us and jump for a title. And so, if he wants to get back in there and fight for the title, if he wants to fight the guys, fight the guys. Fight the top guys. This isn't the Legends League. If you want to fight in the UFC, and, at the top of the game when you're ranked like that, you should fight the best guys out there. And the UFC wanted it, Dana wanted it, everyone wanted it, Anderson declined it.
So just to confirm, UFC 212, is it 100% close? It's definitely not happening, and that's why you're moving on to July 8th? Or is there still a tiny chance that maybe in the last minute this fight somehow might come together?
No, it's 100% over. I don't know what Anderson's not about it. He made an excuse saying I'm coming off a loss and he's coming off a win, but if you look at his record, he's 1-4-1, and in his last 5 fights, 6 fights, whatever it is, and you know his win is questionable. So I don't know where he's justifying that case is kind of. I don't really understand that justification. So I'm coming off a title loss and going 5-1 against the best guys in the world. So yeah, good luck with that one. But we're moving on. We're moving on to 213, and we're trying to find a contender. Somebody who's up there. Somebody who wants to get dirty and get back to that title, and that's what I want.
Oh, yeah, dirty 213. We love it. And we want to talk about that matchup with Rob. Just quickly, is it another case of disappointment with sort of first the Michael Bisping GSP thing with a title shot, and now Anderson Silva? I mean, you've wanted to sort of fight him for a while, and then he knocks back the fight. Is it kind of getting a little bit frustrating from you from the sense that, you have some older people in the division sort of picking and choosing their fights and not really fighting the fights that are there?
Of course. That's all I said. It's straight up. If you're going to fight in the UFC, you got to fight the people that are contenders. If you're looking to be a contender, if you're looking to fight, at the top of the game, or you can go, you and Vitor Belfort can go start a Legends League. That's fair. This is the game. This is the game. Fight it. Fight if you want to fight. Especially when they offer you a fight to fill in. So I don't know. That's my opinion.
And I mean, you're essentially calling out the guy that beat the guy that you were originally supposed to fight in Jacare. So, I mean, you're essentially looking for sort of the stiffest test. But from what you've seen of Rob now that you've had a long time to sort of, I guess, soak in his skills, see what he's about, how do you see yourself beating Rob? What do you think the key and I guess the success is to sort of do what no one's been able to do at middleweight yet?
To do my thing, not get over aggressive, fight the way I need to fight. Like what got me to the title and what won me the title. I'm use my length, use my skills, and every asset I got. So Rob's good, but I know I match up well with anybody in this game, and I know I can pick off anybody. I still believe I'm the best guy out there, and so I'm ready to go prove it against one of the best up and coming kids.
And obviously your stand-up's phenomenal. You've terrorized a lot of people with that. But I guess with Rob, one of the sort of still question marks, even though Jacare wasn't able to really, get him down to the ground, your wrestling's phenomenal. Your jiu-jitsu is probably underrated, but you've had an incredible amount of success with it. Is that something that you also sort of see as like a very good key to victory in that sense and sort of potentially expose Rob's maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? Potentially inexperience on the ground?
I never force takedowns. I'm in there to fight. I take what presents itself. If Rob falls on the ground, maybe I'll take it there. But that's nothing I'm looking forward pushing in this fight. I'm very comfortable in my range, my distance, my kicks. It's something that's going to be hard for Rob to get through to. So, I got my game on the feet, and I got my game. I know I have a large advantage on the ground. He's sharp. He's fast. He's in and out. I like where he's at. I've watched the kid, I've studied the kid, and I want to go out there and I want to challenge, and I want to test this kid too. So, I mean, who else is there right now? Yoel's waiting for the belt. We're on hold waiting for GSP and Bisping. I mean, how long is this kid going to wait? And I don't want to wait any longer. I want to put myself in line to fight for the title.
I mean, a couple of names sticking around in the back of my head is Gegard Mousasi and Fabricio Werdum, of all people, who you've sort of spoken about in the past. I just want to speak about Mousasi, though. Obviously, the fight with Weidman.
Gegard just lost to Jacare, so I'm going for the best of the best. That's my opinion on it.
So if you had to choose between Mousasi and Werdum, would you probably even say you might even have a fun fight with Werdum instead?
Yes. Werdum, I'm tired of people talking. If you're going to run your mouth, talk about it, and talk about grappling matches. Fuck off. If you want to fucking do it for real, let's fight.
I've always,
I told him straight up, I'd move up to heavyweight and I'd fight him. I'd fight heavyweights every day in the gym, I know where I stand with the best heavyweights in the world, and I know what I'm capable of. And, I'm not just running my mouth when I say this. I'll move up to heavyweight and I'll fight him. He thinks he's in line for a title, which is complete bullshit. The last thing the UFC wants is him fighting for a title.
Well, the unfortunate thing is he sort of, shot down that idea. His words was, "I only fight people, I don't fight chickens." I'm just curious why he doesn't want to settle this beef with you. And I'm also wondering, because you guys have had sort of slight digs over the years, but how did this rivalry actually begin? What exactly happened in Strikeforce? And do you remember the moment or incident when the two of you sort of, I guess, realized that you weren't each other's biggest fans?
He's just it was very disrespectful. He's just a completely disrespectful human being. I mean, he's pretty much a slime ball. I'm over the guy. He ran his mouth and called me disrespectful when he was completely out of line, and for years to come. So settle it. I don't know. I mean, that's, you want to talk about a chicken? You're talking about a middleweight coming up to fight you at heavyweight, and that you declined that the UFC was into. And so, who's the chicken?
And I mean, if that fight did come together, and by the way, I think that would be a really fun fight to watch. What kind of weight would you see yourself? Let's say it did happen. Would you sort of, what kind of weight would you be fighting at? I suppose. What's your walking around weight? Would you be at walking around weight? Would you put on some muscle for the matchup? How would you approach it?
I wouldn't cut any weight, I'll tell you that. But I'd be in shape. I'd be my weight. I don't know, maybe 210. A little bit of lifting. Not really though. Just, I'm not a big weightlifter, but I'd eat well and I'd train hard, and I might bulk up a little bit, but I wouldn't be more than 210, 212 probably.
Wow.
Werdum's not a big wrestler. It's not something I got to worry about muscle wise. It's speed, it's quickness, and I use my athleticism. He can't take me down. If he tries, he's going to find himself in more trouble. So I pick him off on the outside and do my thing.
Wow, that would be a crazy matchup if it happened, and something that would be very fun to watch. Now, going back to your division, you mentioned Yoel Romero. He's sort of waiting for that title shot. Are you a little bit surprised this whole GSP Bisping fight? There's still no date. It's still not set. Are you a little bit baffled that this thing's sort of been drawn out for so long?
Yeah, it all comes down to GSP. I think he chose the fight, and they want a big fight, and so he somehow is dragging this thing on. You wonder how long they can, hold the division hostage for a guy like GSP. I think there's other fights they can make, so they need to get on with it. I heard from a very reliable source GSP's not fighting until September, so it'd be a joke if they held that off until September. I think they're better off booking and making Bisping fight Yoel Romero, and then we can get on with this thing and get this division right. We're back where it needs to be.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, are you a fan of this interim title sort of coming in and you guys going on about your business while this whole thing gets figured out?
I am. I'm a fan of it. An interim title, is people wanted to run their mouth and say what they will about an interim title, is a guarantee at a title shot. You put yourself in line. It's like if they're going to hold everything hostage the way they are, and with no telling of what's going to happen with the winners, these guys, they win a fight. You never know what they're going to say. What was GSP going to do when he holds the title? Was he going to want to fight Conor McGregor for the middleweight title? I mean, come on. It's just they don't exactly understand what can happen, after these fights. Bisping, if he's trying to flex as much as he is now, what happens if he beats, GSP? He's not going to want to fight a contender now. So, I mean, the best fight the best. That's what made this company what it is. They need to get back to it.
So just to confirm, so if you do, let's say you and Robert Whittaker, let's say you get matched up July 8th, you want the interim title to be a factor. You want that to be what you're fighting for in your next fight. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily. I think it's. I mean, with Yoel in the mix too, it's tough. They're, gauging them. They're not going to do it. I know what's going on in the back end and what's going through, and they're not going to do it. But I'm very confident. Going out there and beating a Robert Whittaker, puts myself. I mean, Yoel can wait as long as he wants. He beat a broken Weidman already. So going in there and taking top contender, I think it says even more than what the guy's done.
Do you still have any hope that maybe you do get matched?
Split decision. What's that?
I was going to say, do you still have any hope that you might get matched up against Yoel Romero? Because obviously you're in a position where you're essentially calling out everybody in the division. You just want a big fight. You want a fight that will get you there. Romero seems keen on waiting, but is there a possibility, do you think, that maybe you do get Romero and somehow he can be coaxed into fighting you as opposed to waiting?
Romero wants that interim title. I know that for a fact. And he's not going to fight anybody else. So if that comes to be, I'd gladly fight Yoel. You know. That's 1 and 2. 1 and 2 should fight for it, if that's the case. Champion should fight 1, but if 1 and 2 are fighting, it should be an interim title. I guarantee that we're going to fight for the title next.
Yeah, I mean, and that would be amazing. But nevertheless, I mean, the date that you focused on is July 8th. I'm just curious, are you flexible with that date? If the UFC say, oh, Luke, we want you to fight before or after that date. If they somehow could figure out some kind of other matchups, would you be open to it? Or is July 8th now the date that you kind of set on at the moment with your recovery and your knee feeling great? That is the time that you'll need to really, bring out the best Luke Rockhold in training camp for the next fight.
At this point, I like the stage. It's the biggest stage, in the game, Las Vegas International Fight Week. I'm going to come back in a big way, and that's the, best stage to do it on. So, that is ideal. If there's a later date, I could be open to it depending on circumstances. But that's what I'm looking at right now. But we'll see. If the stakes are high enough in close enough proximity, I could push back a little bit. But I don't feel anything sooner really at this point.
Mm-hmm. Luke, we really appreciate the time you're giving us. We're going to let you go in just a moment. Before we do let you go, there's something we wanted to ask you last time.
We gotta hurry up, boys. We gotta hurry up. Nick's in his heat right now. I gotta watch this.
Oh man, we do apologize. 2 questions we're completely out of your hair. Now, you've made it clear how important it is for you to get that rematch with Michael Bisping so you can close that chapter. Considering that he won the last one, are you concerned that he might not take another fight with you so he can essentially close out the end of his career without risking losing that trilogy?
Yeah, it's something I can't comment on. So we'll see. We'll see when the time comes. But like the man that he is, he will stand up and be that guy. But he hasn't proven it thus far. So it'd be nice to get. I'm not gonna hold on to it.
Certainly. And Luke, I mean, we really appreciate time. Thank you so much for coming onto the program. It's exciting. We're excited to see what's next. Hopefully these matchups come together. Luke Rockhold versus Robert Whittaker. Yes, please sign me up, guys. Make sure to follow Luke Rockhold on Twitter at Luke Rockhold. And when he's not hanging out with beautiful women and is in exotic locations, he is training like a mofo, getting ready for July 8th. So we can't wait to see what happens. Luke, thanks again for coming onto the program.
Thanks, guys. Like always. I'll check you out soon.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys, joining us here on the program is a man that you know very, very well. He's a good friend of Submission Radio. It's such a pleasure to have him on the program. We can recognize him from his amazing work on Fox Sports, where he does some of the best stuff when it comes to MMA. His questions at post-fight press conferences send chills down my spine. He is always the man to follow and always the man to see, and he now joins us back on Submission Radio. Damon Martin, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me as always. I come on just for those intros. It kind of boosts my ego for the entire week.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I wish people would invite us on their show and give us nice intros. I mean, damn it, that would really help me out in my personal issues in life. But anyway, let's not dive into those because there's a few things to talk about, guys. And one of the things we're going to start off with is the fights from last weekend. I mean, last weekend, even though on paper, ratings-wise, it didn't do very well. The fights were very fun, and the people that did tune in got a fun show with a lot of fun things happening. The first fight I want to talk to you guys about is Robert Whittaker versus Jacare. Obviously, Robert Whittaker on this program earlier on. It was nice to catch him at the airport in between flights. But, Damon, what was your reaction to seeing what Robert Whittaker was able to do to Jacare?
No, it was an amazing performance, and once again, Robert Whittaker, being the guy who's not necessarily the one being the most talked about, going into the Derek Brunson fight, even though he'd had a lot of big wins, Brunson was rolling off all those knockouts and was talking a lot of trash going into that fight. And then boom, he goes out there and knocks him out in the first round. Jacare signs this new 8-fight deal. We're all excited about him staying with the UFC and looks like he's going to get back into title contention. And then he does the same thing. So Robert Whittaker at this point is a guy you cannot underestimate any longer. I mean, I don't understand how anyone can underestimate that guy at this point. He's an amazing fighter. He's still undersized for a middleweight, but he packs a serious punch. And I was very, very impressed. I thought after that first takedown that Jacare landed, and then when he was able to slip free of that and get back to his feet, and then kind of take over from there, I was just blown away. I thought it was a very, very good performance, a very strong performance, and in a way, his best performance, because listen, Jacare Souza is the real deal. I mean, this guy had not been finished by strikes since he got knocked out by an up kick from Gegard Mousasi. At this point, was it 7-8 years ago? So I mean, that's just a really, really impressive win for him. And surprising, but at the same time, I don't think we should be as surprised considering he continues to do this.
And obviously, Jacare signing a contract extension right before the fight. A lot of people saying, "Hey, what are you doing? You've held out this long. Why don't you wait around?" But really kind of looks like he made the right decision now that his stock has sort of dropped a little bit. Back then, you imagine he would have gotten a bit of a better deal. And Casper, I mean, you and me, we know Robert Whittaker well. To me, I definitely thought this was a winnable fight. I was impressed with his performance, but I kind of saw it going like this. If he could sort of survive down on the ground with Jacare. What were your thoughts on his performance? And I mean, we've had Luke Rockhold on the show. We had Robert Whittaker on the show. Is this a match made in heaven? Do you think this is what's next for him?
I like the matchup. I mean, and just on the fight, what I love is that Rob basically built his whole game plan here behind the jab. He'd sort of lunge in, he'd stay on the outside where it was safe, he'd lunge in, throw this big jab, and then always exit to the right and stay away from Jacare's power side. And then once Jacare got used to that, he'd mix it up. He'd lunge in, instead of exiting to the right, he'd throw in a big right hand, he'd stay there, he'd throw in kicks. I think the fact that he was able to drop Jacare and then sort of Jacare got back up and then was able to finish him, I think the fact that Jacare even had his back at one point and sort of took the fight into his world it just makes it even more impressive, because there was, I wouldn't really say adversity, but Jacare did have his chances. I don't want to take anything away from Jacare. To me, and I don't want to take anything away from Rob's win either, I almost feel like Jacare's kind of turned the corner. He looked just a little bit slower in this fight to me. I think maybe he's sort of on that corner of maybe getting a little bit old at the moment. I think it's a good thing that he signed that 8-fight contract, but then again, maybe it's just a case of Rob looking that good and being so much quicker than him. And, you mentioned, Damon, how Jacare hasn't lost since losing to Mousasi via that up kick. When is the last time Jacare, win or lose, hasn't really mounted any offense in this fight? That's basically what happened here. There was really, other than taking Rose back for a brief second, there was really no moments where Jacare even really mounted anything. I think that's what makes it even more impressive. So I like the performance. I like the fact that he got on the mic afterwards and basically called out Michael Bisping, saying, "You owe me a fight, man." I mean, those aren't the most drastic of fighting words, but I think for Robert Whittaker, being that he's a really introverted guy and the furthest thing away from a trash talker, I think he did really well. And I think you look at a lot of the other guys in the division, in the UFC in general, who are sort of quiet guys, a little bit introverted, guys like Damian Maia, guys like Jacare, who aren't the biggest trash talkers. They don't get, the UFC's big promotion, but the difference here with Robert Whittaker is he has a whole country behind him, and that country of Australia, it just happens to be one of the 4 pay-per-view markets. So I expect a massive push from the UFC from him. And as far as what's next, you mentioned Luke Rockhold and Robert Whittaker. I like it. I think this is the fight to make. I mean, Rockhold is extremely dangerous in the division, still very respected. He's 1 fight removed from being champion. And, Romero, he's probably going to face Bisping if Bisping beats GSP. And if GSP wins, vacates the belt, I think Romero versus the winner of Rockhold for the vacant belt. So it works perfectly.
And I mean, and Robert Whittaker, I mean, you mentioned him saying that after the fight. That's as vocal as Robert Whittaker gets. So that was a positive to see him actually doing that. In the co-main event, Rose Namajunas versus Michelle Waterson. Now, with Michelle Waterson, she was really pushed by the UFC and WME-IMG in this one. They were sort of promoting her, grooming her to be the next sort of big thing. I mean, there was some discussion, Damon, about whether this fight was a smart decision, considering that Rose was such, I suppose, a big threat to Michelle sort of being grown as a talent. If she loses this one, it kind of derails their plans. What were your thoughts when you saw they were sort of putting her up against Rose? And do you think they might have missed the boat by not just holding off on Waterson and possibly even giving her a title shot without having this fight with Rose?
Well, I think the title shot would have been even more disastrous because, what Joanna Jędrzejczyk does to her opponents, especially the ones that are overmatched, it's tough for them to get back in there. I mean, you look what she did to Jessica Penne, who I have just the utmost respect for. the way she diced her up and then, and then sent her packing, Jessica has never, gotten that attention or anything. And I thought that was always too soon for Jessica to get thrown to the wolves, so to speak, with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And I think Michelle would have been thrown to the wolves with Joanna Jędrzejczyk as well. I thought this was definitely a step up in competition, but like I said, when you go out there and you submit Paige Van Zandt in the first round, and Paige Van Zandt is not a bad fighter. Everyone likes to dog on Paige that she's somehow not a good fighter. Listen, is Paige a title contender? No. But is she a top 10 strawweight? Yeah. I mean, we can't erase the things she's done, the knockout over Beck Rawlings, the win over Felice Herrig. Listen, are they top 10? Are they top 5 wins? No, but they are quality enough to put her in the top 10. So you go out there and choke her out in the first round, you are a top 10 fighter. And then once you're in the top 10, listen, all bets are off. Once you get in that top 6, 7, 8, spot, whether you're fighting number 8 versus number 2 or you're fighting number 3 versus number 4, they're all going to be tough matchups. What we saw in this fight is that Michelle just ultimately got overmatched by a very good Rose Namajunas. And right now, I think in this division, we've kind of pared it down to where the top fighters at 115 pounds, come down to the champ, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Obviously, Jessica Andrade, who she's about to fight, coming up at UFC 211. You got Claudia Gadelha and Karolina Kowalkiewicz about to fight at UFC 212 in Brazil. And I think Rose Namajunas is the one kind of rounding out that top 5. And that's what we're looking at. We're just looking at a very dangerous top 5 in this division. And if you look at their records, they really haven't lost to anybody else. They've only kind of lost to each other, with the exception of Rose losing to Carla in the Ultimate Fighter finale when the title was first on the line. So that's just what you're dealing with here. You're dealing with a very, very tough top 5. It's like light heavyweight top 5. I mean, it's just hard for any of those guys to lose to anybody outside of that top 5. That's why you so rarely see, a Glover Teixeira or an Alexander Gustafsson get upset by another person who's not in that top 5. I think that's just really what we're dealing here with strawweight. So I don't think it was too soon for Michelle Waterson. I think the title fight would have been too soon because she can bounce back from this. You can match her up with a couple other lower top 10 fighters, get her back in the race. And maybe she fights a Carolina or even a Claudia somewhere down the road, and maybe by then it's a more winnable fight. I don't know that it will be. Those are still going to be tough matchups, but you can put her back in there. But I think losing the title fight in a weird way puts you further away from another shot than losing a contender spot. Because look at Michael Bisping. How many times do we write that guy off because he lost contender fights, and now he's the champion? It's weird to say that, but it's easier to bounce back from those kind of contender losses than it is a title loss. Because when you lose the title fight, man, it becomes really, really difficult to get back to that title again.
I was really impressed with Michelle Waterson and the toughness also that she displayed in the fight. Obviously got beaten, but it was very tough. So try to hang in there as long as she can. And I think that still earns a bit of respect from fans. Casper, I mean, Rose's performance was very, very impressive. She felt like the UFC wasn't really behind her throughout this fight, and I guess that added a little bit of more fuel to the fire. What were your thoughts on her performance and what she was able to do last weekend?
I think she did a phenomenal job. I mean, I think this is the culmination of the last few fights, everything that she learned in her last fight. She mentioned that she didn't have Pat Barry in her corner, and it was basically a nightmare. And this time, the team of Pat Barry and Trevor Whitman, everybody seemed to be reunited, and it all just clicked. I think she took everything that she took in training camp and put it all together. I think with Michelle, the issue was sort of distance management. She was throwing out those side kicks, those kicks to the legs, but when she'd come in closer, it reminds me of Alistair Overeem when he'd sort of come forward, getting that almost sort of striking clinch distance, and would hang in there just a little bit too long and wouldn't exit quick enough, and then he'd get caught. And I think the same thing happened with Michelle. But with Rose, I mean, what I really also like is the way she adjusted. She spoke about how when Michelle was exiting, she was a little bit slow, and Rose went for a right hand, and she just missed. And in the fight, she thought, well, you know what, if that happens again, I can throw a kick. Obviously, kick has more length to it, more range, and maybe I'll catch her. And she did. She caught her with a beautiful kick, dropped Waterson, and then, really put out a statement with the submission at the end and choked her out, and it kind of looked brutal as well. So I really like that. And you mentioned also Michelle's toughness. I think she doesn't really lose too many points, like you mentioned as well, Damon. She is up there, so I think considering the fact that WME, IMG are behind her, she'll be vaulted up there. And I think it's the perfect stage for Rose. You know, Waterson had such big momentum after beating Paige Van Zandt, who also had a massive push. So Michelle basically took her momentum, and now Rose took Michelle's momentum. So you have a division where recently we spoke to Joanna. We said, hey, you're sort of feeling like you've almost cleaned out the division, almost embarrassingly so, because now look look at it. You've got Jessica Andrade, who knows who's going to win that fight, and then you've got Rose Namajunas right in there, ready to face the whoever wins that. And I mean, imagine if Jessica Andrade beats Joanna Jędrzejczyk, then the whole division is thrown into a tailspin, but it freshens things up. And then all these previous contenders who maybe lost to Joanna, now they're fresh contenders for Jessica Andrade. There'll probably be a rematch. So the division is buzzing. I'm excited.
A lot of exciting things going on. And in the main event, I mean, Demetrious Johnson put on a clinic against Wilson Reyes and brought up the fact that Dana White owed him some belts. Dana White also said the fact that it takes some time to get these belts together, but he promises to get the belts to Demetrious Johnson. Me and Casper, of course, spent some time with Tyron Woodley's belt that Conor McGregor got at UFC 205 in New York. We did that last night at the John Kavanagh show. He brought it down to Australia with him. Belts. We held it for a little bit of time and got to feel what a real belt feels like.
We caressed it.
Nice. It feels solid, heavy. Never probably get a chance to feel another belt again. Anyway, back to the main event. Demetrious Johnson's win. I mean, the guy is a bona fide superstar when it comes to hardcore MMA fan base. Ratings-wise, it doesn't look like he pulls in huge ratings, but we're seeing history being made in front of our eyes. This is a man that's widely considered to be pound for pound the best fighter in the world and possibly one of the greatest of all time. What did this fight do for his legacy, in your opinion?
Well, it just solidified what we kind of already knew about Demetrious, that he's one of the greatest fighters of all time and one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the sport, and arguably right now the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. Listen, he was a massive favorite over Wilson Hayes, and so he should have beat Wilson Hayes. I mean, that's not a fight he should lose. He went out there and did exactly what he was supposed to do, but let's be honest, that's not always the case. I mean, when you are that much of a favorite, that's when upsets happen. That's when, the unexpected, turn of events happens to these champions. Look at, how much of a favorite was Ronda Rousey over Holly Holm? How much of a favorite was George St. Pierre over Matt Serra? So, when you're expected to win, when you're expected to roll over a guy or a girl, that makes the expectations that much higher for the performance. So the fact that Demetrious can go out there and do it time and time again in fights he's supposed to win, I think that's very impressive. And, as far as the ratings and things like that go, I will say, and this is not me defending because I work for Fox, but when you have a card in April, it's different than when you have a card even in the summer or in the fall, because one of the biggest things that helps promote these cards are other sporting events, just like anything else. So when you have a show in January or in December, like they did last year with Paige Van Zandt and Michelle Watterson, they had the NFL, which is obviously the biggest sport in the United States, promoting the fight during the games, promoting the fight during the commercials. So you're getting, 30, 40 million people seeing these commercials. And when you get 5 or 6 million in ratings, that's expected because of the kind of shoulder advertising you're getting. Right now in April, there's really not much going on. I mean, the NBA playoffs are going on. The NHL playoffs are going on. NHL playoffs don't get very good ratings here in America, and the NBA playoffs are on a different network. So they just didn't have that shoulder programming to really promote the show. Now, you would hope at some point the UFC, just like any other organization, they could get ratings on their own without that kind of shoulder programming, but that's just the nature of the beast. I mean, it's no different than boxing. I mean, Triple G is arguably the best boxer in the sport right now, and his last pay-per-view did awful numbers. I mean, that's just, you hate to see it, and I hate to call it for what it is, but that's just what it is. And so Demetrious Johnson has a bit of a problem because, and I think I've heard other people bring this up as well, is that he doesn't have an equal, and it's tough when you don't have an equal. I think in a way that's how we kind of got a little bit with Jon Jones for a while. He was just so dominant, just kind of beating people so lopsided. It's fun in the beginning because you kind of like watching that. You like watching the blowout. You know what I mean? You like watching man, I can't believe this guy's so good. He just beat this guy so handily. But then when you see it 4 or 5 times, you're kind of like, man, I'd kind of like to see this guy get pushed. I'd kind of like to see this, something different. And then eventually ran into Alexander Gustafsson, and that was, one of the greatest fights of all time. And then you start to pay attention again. You're like, oh my God, someone made him look human. Unfortunately, it's been when did he fight Dominic Cruz? 2011, 2012. At this point, people have kind of forgotten that DJ has been pressed. I mean, he had a couple of dicey moments against John Dodson a few years ago, but that's really it. So when you get to this point of just sheer dominance, I think it's not that we don't respect it. It's just that when you see it coming, when you expect it, you're not surprised. I think The bigger surprise would have been if people tuned in on Sunday morning and saw headlines, Wilson Hayes shocks the world and taps out Demetrious Johnson. Then people would have lost their minds. But that's the point. He just does not have an equal in this division. And I think that's hurting him a little bit because there's nobody that he would step into at 125 pounds where you would legitimately say, without, trying to make up some kind of excuse, that you would not pick him to beat. I'm just being honest. There's no one in this division that you would say Demetrious wouldn't be favored to defeat right now.
And it's kind of like he needs that sort of Conor McGregor, that Chael Sonnen to his Anderson Silva, that kind of, I suppose, person that, really becomes his nemesis in the division and they can put a fun fight together. I mean, I think you're right, Damon. Most of the fights that he's had have been very one-sided. And the rematches, he's been even more dominant in the rematches than in the first fight most of the time. And that Tim Elliott fight, I thought that was a fun fight because people didn't really expect much from Tim Elliott in that one. That kind of had a couple of fun back and forth moments, but you're right. It's one of those things, the guys that he's beating, and who knows? I mean, that's the thing. The competition is sort of who he's taken on, but if there was someone huge, an even tougher opponent, who knows where his skills extend to? But at the moment, he looks unbelievable. And Casper, a lot of people always talking about the fact of, will he move up? Will he do a super fight? Will he get that sort of $1 million offer from the UFC to do so? What are your thoughts? Does he stick around in the flyweight and defend his title a few more times and make history, or do you sort of want to see him move up and try the super fight eventually?
I don't want to see it just yet. I actually think that Joseph Benavidez should be next. I know we've already seen that fight, and I think it may not be the fight or the matchup that gets the fans really salivating. I get that, but I think it's an important stepping stone. I think that DJ, he's basically now being marketed as making history, not he's facing a tough challenger. So I think they should continue that trend, and then if he beats Benavidez, which there's a really good chance he does, then he breaks Anderson Silva's record. That makes him, a little bit more marketable. I don't know how much hardcore fans would really care, but maybe to casual fans it would mean something. And then to make the Cody versus Dillashaw winner fight and potentially beat him at 125, I think that would mean a lot more. I don't think you halt that momentum. I mean, if Cody Garbrandt beats TJ Dillashaw, and let's say he goes down to 125, he says that he can make it, and Dillashaw as well. He's also said that he could cut weight and make 125. Imagine that they're fighting a guy that's beaten Anderson Silva's record. Let's say they beat Mighty Mouse, then they absorb his star power, and then you've got a dual champion. And I think that'd be amazing, and I think it could work especially for bantamweight and flyweight, because those divisions, they kind of move slowly. Like, there are contenders waiting in the wings, but a lot of those guys, they're not even booked in fights. I mean, you look at, I think, both bantamweight and flyweight, bantamweight especially, so many of those top guys have just no fights on the horizon whatsoever. So I think even if you do have, a guy holding both belts, A, you could create a new star, which is something that the UFC needs, and B, it wouldn't really affect either division. And in that time, you could have other guys at flyweight, for example, coming up in the ranks. You've got guys like, Ray Borg, he's got some momentum. You've got Tim Elliott making another comeback. He could potentially be fighting for the title soon. You've got Sergio Pettis, he's on a good run. Henry Cejudo, he might, be back in there with one or two wins. So, I mean, if Demetrious Johnson does want to stay at flyweight, there are options. But I'm not opposed to him fighting the winner of TJ Dillashaw or Cody Garbrandt. I just think he needs to beat Anderson Silva's record. I'm curious. I want to know your thoughts, Damon. If this super fight does happen, A, are you a fan of it? And do you think it should be Demetrious Johnson moving up to 135? Or do you think it'd be Cody or TJ should be moving down to 125?
Well, I like the idea of a super fight because in terms of, it brings a little bit more attention and star power. But the problem is just attaching the word super fight doesn't mean people are going to tune in to watch it. You and I, everyone on this show, would be excited about it. But as we said before, the hardcores are the ones who are already excited about Demetrious Johnson. It's not them we're trying to attract. We're trying to attract the casual fans who tune in because they know Conor McGregor, they know Ronda Rousey, they know Jon Jones, where they see the conflict of a Chael Sonnen, or they see the conflict of a main event that makes them interested in tuning in because there is some sort of rivalry built into a main event. And so just throwing together, listen, I love TJ Dillashaw. I think he's amazing, but just putting TJ Dillashaw against Demetrious Johnson and saying it's a super fight doesn't guarantee people are going to tune in. Now, everybody on this show is going to be excited, but I don't know that the casual audience is going to get that much more excited for TJ Dillashaw versus Demetrious Johnson than they would Demetrious Johnson against Henry Cejudo or Demetrious Johnson against Joseph Benavidez. To truly make it, something that's going to be worthwhile for people to buy into is to have a true rival, something that's going to make it more exciting. So, I don't disagree with what with what Dana White said over the weekend when he said, maybe if Cody Garbrandt gets 3 or 4 more title defenses and then you can put together that super fight with Demetrious Johnson, maybe it makes sense. If Dominic Cruz had beaten Cody Garbrandt, I think right now we'd be staring at Dominic Cruz and Demetrious Johnson too, and it would be a much bigger fight because Dominic is a higher profile guy. He's on Fox all the time, so he has a lot of chances to build up the fight. And then Demetrious off his 10th consecutive, or in theory 11th consecutive title defense, taking on a Dominic Cruz in a rematch from a fight they had 5-6 years ago would be amazing. But right now, I mean, would I watch Cody Garbrandt and Demetrious Johnson? Sure. But is there any story to it? Is there any kind of compelling reason to want it? No, there's just not. And that's why when people say there are 2 sets of rules in the UFC, there's 1 set of rules for everybody else. There's a set of rules for Conor McGregor. It's true because Conor demands that attention. Conor could fight anybody. Conor could fight the 3 of us right now. And I guarantee you there'd be more people that would tune in to watch that than Demetrious Johnson's last fight. And that's not an insult to Demetrious Johnson. That's just a point of the star power, the attraction that a guy like Conor McGregor gets. So super fight sounds great. I'd watch, absolutely. But I still think ultimately it comes down to somebody. And John Dodson was probably the one who came closest to kind of bringing out that little bit of an inner demon in Demetrious Johnson. And if you go back and watch the ratings, those ratings for the Demetrious Johnson, John Dodson fights were pretty solid. And I think that was part of it, is because John Dodson pushed his buttons. You got to see a little different side of Demetrious Johnson come out from those promos, and the build up to that fight was just because he had a guy actually pushing his buttons a little bit. So I'm not trying to build like a false rivalry, but that's what he needs. He needs somebody that's going to promote the fight, because just putting 2 guys together and slapping super fight on the label doesn't necessarily mean people are going to tune in.
I agree with you. If Dominic Cruz did beat Garbrandt, it would be a completely different matchup. And I mean, I think the worst matchup in terms of getting people to watch would be the TJ Dillashaw DJ matchup. I think if Garbrandt does get a few defenses, I think there's more excitement there because he's a guy that knocks people out, and he does trash talk, and he says some stuff that's really interesting, and he's really intense during fight week. So that could really draw some attention. And also, Joseph Benavidez, it would be great if he does fight DJ, but he's got to beat Ben 10 at UFC New Zealand. That's on July 11th, and it's pretty likely that he'll do that. Let's jump to another man who at the moment is in training camp to defend his title. But Damon, we don't know who the opponent is. Now, me and Casper spoke to John Kavanagh yesterday. I'm, of course, talking about Tyron Woodley. We did the show with John Kavanagh yesterday, and we asked John Kavanagh if there's any chance at all that Conor McGregor is the man. And, of course, John Kavanagh said no, that it's not going to happen, and McGregor's not going to be taking that fight before the fight with Floyd Mayweather, if ever. So, Damon, the question is, the division's pretty tied up. What exactly is going to happen with Tyron Woodley next? Now that he started his training camp, who do you think the opponent could be?
I'll give you a hint, and I'll give you 3 numbers that'll give you this hint. 209. Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz is the name I've heard. And I heard somebody suggest it earlier today on Twitter, kind of in a conversation with me, and it immediately made me start digging into it. And I started hearing some rumors about this. Now, it's not a done deal. I don't even know if this is actually true. I've just heard some buzzing that there is some interest there. From what I've heard more recently, now again, don't take this as document, don't take this as testament. I'm just saying the rumors I've heard is that Nick had recently gotten a new management team. I don't know exactly what happened to his old manager, or if he just got a new manager, or if there's just somebody else advising him. I don't know the full story, but from what I heard was he's working with some new people, and the plan is to get something together so he could get a fight back in the UFC. If Tyron Woodley is training for July 8th, and the UFC needs a big fight for July 8th, which is clearly the case, because everything I've been told, Michael Bisping and George St. Pierre are not going to fight until the late summer or probably early fall. Probably looking at October for that fight, considering that Conor and Floyd right now tentatively is September, and they're not going to put a big pay-per-view like that up against Conor and Floyd, because that's just asking people not to spend the money. So I'm hearing October for that fight. So that takes that away. Now, the other rumor I've heard is that the UFC wants to do a really big card on July 8th to kind of make up for the loss, so to speak, of Bisping versus GSP. So I've heard rumors about Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko being on that card. Obviously, we already know Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw are going to be on that card. Now imagine Tyron Woodley against Nick Diaz on that card as the headliner. That would be a great fight. I know everyone can complain that Nick Diaz doesn't deserve it, but once again, doesn't matter. And I know I've said this on the show before. If you're an MMA fan, strike the word deserves from your vocabulary, because who wouldn't watch Nick Diaz? Who wouldn't watch Nick Diaz? So that's the fight. I again, nothing is confirmed whatsoever, but someone mentioned it to me today, and immediately a light bulb went on in my head, and I said, wow, that actually makes sense, because Jorge Masvidal and Damian Maia are fighting on May 13th. I have just a real hard time believing that the winner of that fight, unless it's ended really quick, is going to turn around for a title fight on July 8th. Now, it's possible. If Damian Maia goes out there and taps out Jorge Masvidal in 2 minutes like he did Carlos Condit, I could easily see them slipping him in. But they got to start promoting that card soon. I mean, July 8th seems like it's a far time away, but they got to start building that up. You know what I mean? And I don't know. That's the one that seems to make the most sense to me.
Oh, 100%. And you've single-handedly got me excited, because when I saw what Tyron Woodley said, and he did an interview with, I believe, BJPenn.com, and he sort of explained that, yes, that is the card that I'm going for, July 8th, and Dana White basically asked me, when do you want to fight? I said July 8th, and so it looks like that might happen. I kind of thought, well, this seems like he's sort of trying to be proactive, Tyron Woodley, and just trying to get the fans behind it, maybe get some buzz going, and maybe make a lot of people think that, hey, he is fighting July 8th, and hopefully pressure the UFC into putting him on that card, but nothing's really done. But then you bring up GSP, and I agree with you, kind of like, if GSP went through all these long contract negotiations, and now he's saying, look, I want to fight in September or October, I don't think the UFC are really going to try and strong-arm him after all that they sort of went through. It seems like they try and keep him happy. So that, like you mentioned, that really leaves, okay, if Tyron Woodley is supposed to be fighting on this July 8th card, you need a big matchup. And you look at the last 4 International Fight Week July pay-per-views, right? UFC 200, they've all been massive. UFC 200 was Tate Nunes, and we were supposed to have Jones DC. UFC 189 was McGregor Mendez, and then we had Lawler and McDonald. UFC 175 was Weidman Machida, which was very anticipated at the time, and obviously Ronda Rousey versus Alexis Davis. And then 162 was Weidman and Anderson Silva 2. The co-main event wasn't huge. It was Frankie Edgar and Charles Oliveira, but everybody and their mother wanted to see Weidman and Anderson Silva 2. So you look at that and you think, all right, if Tyron Woodley is going to fight on this card, a lot of love for Damian Maia, a lot of love for Jorge Masvidal, but it just doesn't make sense that for, you know, the fifth year, all of a sudden, International Fight Week, not to say that it's for the fifth year ever, but all of a sudden they're going to break this trend of doing massive fights, and now it's going to be Tyron Woodley versus Damian Maia, or Tyron Woodley versus Jorge Masvidal. Love those guys, but they're just not massive names. You bring in Nick Diaz, and now you have, like you mentioned, this would certainly make up for the lack of GSP and Michael Bisping. And Tyron Woodley, one of the biggest things that he mentioned is that he's on the cusp of becoming a star. I mean, I think this is the fight that could bring it up. I mean, you know, him and his rivalry with Stephen Thompson, that was fun, but Nick Diaz will take this to a whole nother level. The trash talk is going to be insane. They have a rivalry dating all the way back to the Strikeforce days. We remember back when Nick Diaz was at a weigh-ins. I don't remember for which fight, but he was heckling, I think, Tyron Woodley and saying a bunch of things. So there's so much history there. And look, if Nick Diaz can sort of bring in the ratings and the draws, and all eyes are going to be on this fight, and Tyron Woodley's there and attached, he could potentially become a star. I think the rivalry is going to be epic. And look, what a crazy situation it would be if Nick Diaz wins and beats Tyron Woodley. Then the whole division basically gets flipped on its head, and everything that was old becomes new again. So I really like the idea. And we're hoping to go to International Fight Weeks, and we want big names, so it makes me even more excited.
Yeah, that's the most important part there, Damon. Submission Radio wants to be up there to make the card good. And I mean, and to add to all of Casper's ends, and what if Nick Diaz becomes champion? Now Conor McGregor is trying to hunt for a Nick Diaz fight and win the welterweight belt. Oh my God. The world is just turning upside down. I just want to quickly mention Tyron Woodley. He does do these blogs. I believe it's called Champ Life. He released the third video just recently, and on a social media told everybody basically, oh, you want to find out whether or not this Conor McGregor fight is going to happen? Check out this Champ Life video, which of course I did. I clicked through it, and there was nothing about it whatsoever. But it was a great video. It was a great video, and he bought cars for his friend who's going through a tough time, and for his mum, and he bought a car for his family, and then he was in a movie with Sylvester Stallone, and he was like in an ad, and he was buying jewelry with Sage Northcutt. It was like great, but I thought I thought, man, this is the problem. Like, you're tricking people into clicking into this video instead of really sort of letting people know, hey, this is what happened. And you had a lot of hate on the video of people being like, I thought this was going to happen here. So that's one thing with Tyron Woodley. It's like he kind of trolls people a little bit. And I think sometimes fans, they buy into it because, let's be honest, with MMA, you see a headline and pretty much run with it no matter where you see it. And if you have the champ telling you something, then you believe it. And he's done it previously with a few things like the Bisping fight and stuff like that. So I think it doesn't help his popularity with the fans when he does that kind of thing. But Damon, I'm just curious. One of the things me and Casper were talking about, and I just want you to weigh in on this. Why no Jon Jones at the International Fight Week? Why is this fight being sort of tentatively looked at for UFC 214?
Well, Jon Jones's suspension, if I remember the date correctly, ends, I believe, on July 6th, I think is the date. And the fight is July 8th. Now, I don't know how much of a problem that creates in terms of licensing and things like that, because technically his suspension wouldn't end before 2 days before the pay-per-view. I mean, I've seen other fighters get scheduled while their suspension is still, not finished, but typically it doesn't run this close to the event. So I think that's ultimately what comes down to the problem, is because he was suspended in Nevada, for 1 year, and they would be asking him to get licensed again before his suspension is up. And I think that would get a little dicey potentially with the commission. Would they allow it? Probably, because they know it would be a big fight for Nevada. But then you run the risk of that happening in the future with boxers or with kickboxers who say, look, you set a precedent now. My suspension's up in 3 days. I can fight in 3 days. So I think that's what I'm guessing. Just just a little too close to the event for it to really come together. I think July 29th makes more sense. It's a little later. You're not running so close to the end of the suspension. You're also not as worried necessarily about the commission getting involved and saying we're not going to license this guy. Although I think they would license him, but as I said, I think it just opens up a can of worms that they don't want to deal with.
Interesting stuff. Now, I want to talk about what's happening in the light heavyweight division, because there is a bit of fun. There's some rays of sunshine, rays of light. There is DC and Jimmy Manuel going back and forth. There's the impending return of Jon Jones. I feel like we need to soak up all of this light while we can before DC potentially retires soon and Jon Jones goes back to dominating and we have basically nothing left and no contenders. But what do you think about this situation, Damon? Because it seems like Jon Jones has been offered by Dana White of the UFC. He can do a tune-up fight. He can fight somebody else before DC, and if he does that, DC will face Manuwa, or he can face DC straight away. Now, I think a popular train of thought is, if for DC in his career, it would be beneficial to fight Manuwa first, get that fight out of the way. It seems like a no disrespect to Jimmy Manuel, but it seems like a very winnable matchup. If DC was to use his wrestling, he could definitely do something similar to Anthony Rumble Johnson. He gets a nice payday. He's the champion. He gets pay-per-view points. Him and Manuel obviously going to trash talk. They're already doing it. They're going to sell the crap out of that pay-per-view. Don't know how the ratings would be, but either way, DC gets a slice of that pay-per-view, and then he goes on to fight Jon Jones and make probably his biggest payday ever. That fight's even bigger. But then what do you do with Jon Jones in the meantime? This notion of him taking a tune-up fight, that's all well and good, but who's he going to take? I mean, you've got Alexander Gustafsson facing Glover Teixeira. That's a really risky matchup. I mean, first of all, I don't think anybody wants to see Glover versus Jon Jones too. And then if you get Gustafsson as a tune-up fight, that's a really, really tough tune-up fight. And I don't think the UFC are willing to risk that DC Jon Jones rematch potentially falling out. You move down the rankings, you got Jimmy Manuel, well, he's going to be taken by DC, and then we're going back to Shogun. I don't think anybody wants to see that rematch. You've got Volkan Ozdemir, Corey Anderson, Misha Serkinov. Those guys I don't think will be facing Jon Jones anytime soon, unless the UFC want to give him this slam dunk layup, because we all know that at UFC 197 when he came back, he sort of looked a little bit different, Jon Jones, and maybe he does need to get his feet wet. What do you think about this whole light heavyweight situation? What do you think is the best course of action for DC and Jon Jones, and what do you think is more likely?
Well, listen, in a perfect world, it should be Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. In my opinion, you don't get tune-ups and you don't get warm-ups when you're at Jon Jones level. That's just the sport we're in. Dominic Cruz came back from how many knee surgeries and torn groins and everything else and fought TJ Dillashaw on day one and found a way to win. I mean, one of the most miraculous and amazing comeback stories of all time. And this is a guy coming back from serious, like potentially life, career-threatening injuries. George St. Pierre has been off for almost 4 years, and the guy is stepping back in to fight Michael Bisping in a division he's never competed in before. Now, we can all sit here and say, and I would agree, that Michael Bisping is probably a more favorable matchup style-wise than Tyron Woodley, because I think Tyron Woodley is quite possibly the worst possible matchup for Georges St-Pierre right out of the gate, because Tyron's obviously a power puncher with tremendous wrestling, but he's still stepping up a division at 185 pounds, and he's taking on the champion. We can all the fighters, everybody can sit here and try to disrespect Michael Bisping, but he has still consistently been one of the best fighters in the world for the past decade, and he is now the middleweight champion of the world, and Georges St-Pierre is fighting him after 4 years away. So if you're Jon Jones, he hasn't been out for injury. He hasn't been out because his knee got ripped apart, and he had reconstructive surgery. He got suspended for a year for a banned substance, and that came after he was suspended for however many months that was for a hit-and-run accident. So, to me, Jon Jones doesn't get that pass. Jon Jones is the greatest fighter of all time. Right now, I'm sorry Demetrious Johnson, I'm sorry Georges St-Pierre, and I'm sorry Anderson Silva. Jon Jones is the greatest fighter of all time, in my opinion, and that's why he doesn't get a pass. He doesn't get a tune-up fight. He doesn't get a warm-up fight. He doesn't get a pass to sit out even longer and say, I need a warm-up. No, you don't. But that being said, that's my opinion. Now, what do I think is going to happen, or what's more likely to happen? It certainly sounds like they're moving closer and closer into the direction of Jimmy Manuwa in DC. Now, maybe Dana White's statement the other day where he said that, if Jon Jones wants it, it's his fight. If not, we're giving it to Jimmy Manuwa. Now, that may be a little bit of constructive promoter-ism, so to speak, from Dana White, trying to force, kind of basically wiggle Jon Jones in there to say, listen, if you don't want this fight with DC, we're giving it to Jimmy Manuwa. Now, maybe that's the way he's trying to secure Jon Jones to say, no, I'll take the fight. But if not, I know Jimmy wants it. I talked to Jimmy Manuwa earlier today, and when I asked Jimmy Manuwa that question, his response, and I kind of agree with him, was, why does Jon Jones get to decide? Why is he the guy who decides who fights Daniel Cormier? Shouldn't the UFC and Daniel Cormier kind of decide who he's going to fight? Yeah. I mean, he is the champion. And listen, as I said, I'm sitting here raving about Jon Jones. I think Jon Jones is the best ever, but he is coming off a year suspension, off of the year thing with the hit and run. After all the problems he had, his days of kind of picking and choosing his shots, not to say he ever really did that, but I'm just saying that his power right now is a little diminished. Now, if he comes back and wrecks DC and wins back the title and proves everybody wrong to say that, that he's back and he's better than ever, then yeah, you give him kind of the power back. But right now, that power, that pendulum is not swinging in his favor. So in a way, I kind of agree with Jimmy Manuwa when he says, why does he get to choose? Why is he the guy who ultimately will decide who fights for the title? So it seems like they're leaning in the direction of Jimmy Manuwa, but like I said, in the back of my head, playing that conspiracy theory, putting on my Eddie Bravo hat for a minute, I still think this may be Dana White's kind of way of wiggling in and saying, okay, well, Jon, if you don't want it, we're going to give it to Jimmy Manuwa.
I'd absolutely agree with you. He's done that before in the past, and I think from the UFC's perspective, and even from like a booking perspective, you're like, hey, get Jon Jones a tune-up fight on 214, and then have DC and Jimmy Manuwa, and then Jon Jones maybe, goes through his tune-up, you give him someone relatively easy, and then he comes out at the end and you're promoting the next card, because you're struggling to sort of put together these big cards, and that would sell quite well. But at the same time, if it is up to Jon Jones, I doubt that Jones is looking to make DC an extra payday. I think he's looking to get in there and get his title. If it's up to him, I think he'd choose that. Just quickly, there's a lot of rumors, Damon, about Cris Cyborg being on 214 as well. What do you know about this? Is it likely that we'll see her on the card as well?
Well, I think Cris Cyborg clearly wants to fight on that card. The card's in Anaheim, which is a stone's throw from her part of town in Orange County, California. So she wants to fight on that card. I think ultimately Cris Cyborg will fight on that card. The real question right now is, will she fight Germaine Durandamy for the title? And from everything I've heard right now, from the conversation I had with her manager earlier today, is that fight is not a done deal. It's not signed, and there's no, terms in place for Germaine to fight Cris Cyborg. I think Cris Cyborg is pressing the button, hoping that she can get it to happen. But right now, I can tell you 100% it is not a done deal. Now, that doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that it's not happening right now, and it hasn't been signed or inked right now. I think Cris Cyborg is just doing some creative promoting right now, kind of like Dana White, to try to angle her way into getting that fight with Germaine. But I think ultimately Cris Cyborg will be on that card because it makes sense. I mean, you want to promote a big fight card. We do know that Cris Cyborg is a draw. and you put her in there against Jermaine Durandam. I mean, of course, that's an ideal situation. But if she's not available, maybe you have her fight Megan Anderson, or you have her fight somebody else that's out there. Maybe if a Cindy Dandois can get a win this weekend against Alexis Davis, maybe you convince her to test the waters at 145 again, and maybe she goes and moves to 145 and takes a shot at Cris Cyborg. So there's other possibilities out there. I just don't. I would just caution anybody to think that the fight with Jermaine Durandam is going to happen. Cris Cyborg, yes. Title fight against Jermaine, not so much. At least not right now.
And I'm just curious, just quickly before we move on, we're going to be talking about Artem Lobov and Cub Swanson. What do you see sort of, I guess, long term for Cris Cyborg in terms of the UFC? Because there was some talk before where she may be open to looking through the free agency. We know Bellator's got a 145-pound division. She's obviously worked with Scott Coker before back in the Strikeforce days. Seemed like, this whole Cyborg UFC relationship, there's been a lot of frustration on Cyborg's end and maybe even both ends. Do you see her long term in the UFC, or do you think maybe after this fight we don't really know what'll happen with her?
I still think ultimately she ends up back with the UFC. I mean, I know Bellator has a featherweight division, and yes, they have thrown a lot of money around recently, and they are, testing the waters of pay-per-view. So it's a real possibility, considering the history that she has with Scott Coker, that, he would want to sign her away. But I still think ultimately the UFC is a bigger platform for her. I mean, she's, even if she's fighting, people who aren't necessarily 145-pound fighters, the fact that she has pay-per-view, the fact that she can get pay-per-view points, the fact that, ultimately the UFC is still going to end up paying her more, I think is ultimately what's going to determine her future. It is interesting because of her history with Scott Coker, of course, but I think, if she wins a UFC title, she becomes UFC champion, I have a hard time believing that they're going to just allow her to leave, or they're going to allow her to, leave with the title or just surrender the title to go fight somewhere else. I think they will get a deal done. When everyone talks about the UFC and free agency recently, they've lost some people. They lost Lorenz Larkin, they lost Kyoji Horiguchi and some other people, but the people that they really want to keep, the fighters that they really want to keep, that they really want to sign to long-term deals, just like what we saw with Jacare Souza, I think they're ultimately going to get it done. I mean, the UFC, as much money as Viacom has, they've gone through a lot of reshuffling lately. I mean, don't forget, Spike TV here in the United States is about to become the Paramount Network. And, Bellator is going to be a centerpiece of their new programming schedule, but who knows? I mean, Viacom in America has undergone a lot of rocky roads lately, man. A lot of leadership problems, a lot of changeover, and just because they have deep pockets as a company doesn't mean they're going to file all that money into Bellator. So ultimately, the UFC still has the ability to pay more money up front to the stars they want to keep. And I think at this point, Cris Cyborg has proven to be a draw. She is a star. Yes, she's been a little difficult to deal with the whole weight cutting thing, and then you had the whole drug testing thing last year, all this other stuff, but she's worth the risk. She's worth the gamble, because with Ronda Rousey gone, Miesha Tate retired, Cris Cyborg is, Cris Cyborg and Joanna Jędrzejczyk right now are your, the women you want to invest in. And so I don't think she's going to ultimately go anywhere. I just think what she wants is she wants her title shot. She wants to prove that she's the queen of the featherweight division, and she just can't get that shot right now because, it doesn't sound like the fight with Jermaine is going to happen right now, or at least as of right now, it's not happening.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Excited to see what happens with that card. Now, before we wrap this up, Damon, just want to quickly talk about the main event from UFC Nashville, Cub Swanson versus Artem Lobov. I know that there's a lot of criticism in regards to whether or not Artem deserves this fight, but I think one of the things I like about it is, even though my prediction for this fight is obviously that Cub Swanson will win it, but I think if Artem does somehow manage to pull this off, the UFC sort of have a bit of a new star on their hands. I mean, Artem has a lot of followers because of the fact that he trains with Conor McGregor and he's from SBG Island, but if he's actually able to somehow beat Cub Swanson in this fight and get that victory, all of a sudden you have something going on in the featherweight division, a bigger star, someone you can use to maybe co-main event a fight night card again in Europe or something like that. So from that perspective, from that booking perspective, I kind of like it. And I also know these guys are going to go out there and it should be a really, really fun fight. But aside from my prediction of Cub Swanson, do you see this fight going any differently than what I think? Damon, do you think there's a chance that Artem can actually walk away with a win here?
There's a chance, and I wouldn't say it's a big chance because I think Cub Swanson is the better fighter, the more proven fighter, and I would pick Cub Swanson to win. But when you have a guy with Artem's power, and he does pack a lot of, popping his punches, and he throws from very weird angles. He throws from his hips, which is really odd. You don't see guys doing that and generating the kind of power that he generates. But, listen, you never know. I mean, Cub Swanson got knocked out by Jose Aldo with a flying knee in whatever it was, like 8 seconds, back in the WEC. So you can never say never with a guy like Artem Lobov who has the power he has. So anything is possible. And I think Artem knows that. When I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago about this fight, he knows everyone's counting him out. He knows no one expects him to win this fight. So he's going in with that kind of expectation of saying everyone's counting me out. And that's what makes a guy like Artem Lobov so dangerous, is because he does have knockout power. He does have a lot of confidence. He's confident working with Conor McGregor on a daily basis. He does have legit knockout power. And while his record is not great at 13-12 or whatever it is, you can't discount 25 fights is a lot of experience, good or bad. So, he's got a shot. Do I like his chances? Not necessarily, but you can never, when you have two power punchers, you have two dynamic guys going in there who both have knockout power. I don't think you can either just immediately say it's done with, it's a blowout, there's no chance this guy wins. Yes, Cub Swanson should win this fight. Yes, I'm picking Cub Swanson to win, but like I said, when you got a guy with knockout power and a guy who's going to promote the fight, I mean, you guys have interviewed Artem. He's a great interview. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, he's funny. He's well-spoken. I mean, he was talking to me about that Twitter beef he had with Cub Swanson, where Cub was saying, I have more fans than you in Russia. And his quote was just classic. He said, all that means is you're going to have more people at your funeral. I was dying. I was like, that's a great quote. So, I mean, that's, like I said, Artem knows how to build it up. And the thing about it is people like to give Dylan Dennis a lot of crap for kind of becoming Conor's clone in a lot of ways. Artem is Conor's teammate, and I think he's got a little bit of his swagger from Conor, but he's a much different guy. He's a much different trash talker. He's very smart and intelligent with his trash talk. So it makes it for fun, and I enjoyed this fight. Is it the best fight in the world? But listen, I've seen Cub Swanson fight Ricardo Lamas. Now, I love Ricardo Lamas, okay? This is not a knock on Ricardo Lamas whatsoever, but in terms of rankings, that would be a bigger fight. But is it going to be as exciting? Is it going to be as, dynamic as what you may see with Cub and Artem? Probably not. So, I enjoy the fight.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about Artem, I mean, it's so much fun having him on the program, and people that may not know this, but he's a very, very, very intelligent guy, and what you mentioned there is very true. I mean, if he is able to pull this fight off, if he does end up winning it, I mean, you can get so much fun stuff out of him, from build-ups to fights, just his interviews. The guy's a class act, so very excited for this one. But just with that, guys, that is the end of the program. Big thank you to Luke Rockhold, Robert Whittaker, Jake Shields, and Gunnar Nelson, and of course, Damon Martin. You can follow Damon on Twitter at Damon Martin. Make sure to check out all of his great work. A lot of amazing stuff popping up all the time. And with that, it is the end of the episode, Casper. I mean, a fun week for Submission Radio, doing the last show with John Kavanagh in Melbourne, and now a fun episode to cap things off.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a better way, and I'm really happy and thankful for the guests that we were able to get. I feel like these are the people that people wanted to hear from, especially Robert Whittaker and especially Luke Rockhold. These guys are the hot kids on the block at the moment, so really happy that we were able to get them. And of course, Damon, thank you so much. We owe you eternally for the amazing stuff that you do in general, but especially on our program as well. You make, I think we've been chatting for like almost 50 minutes, and for me, it's absolutely flown by. So we hope that everybody listening has enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys next week. Stay safe.